3, 2, 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening everyone, wherever the hell you are and you still have the boredom to watch my shows. Welcome again to the Freedom Alternative Interviews. I'm once again recording Stavry, otherwise known to all of you as V, by popular request. I traveled all the way to his semi-renovated apartment just so we can get to record these things. Hi there.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, it's been a long journey. I've been on the road since February, so yeah. We left the conversation last time when we discussed, I believe, economics. How's been the news lately? Because you've stayed online, whereas I was in Poland, so I'm gonna ask you how you perceive the news lately. Let's go with the more controversial topics. Epstein.
In my opinion, it should be bigger than the Watergate scandal.
It should Watergate.
It should outrage everyone. But
aiming big, I see.
Yeah. Well, it's quite outrageous, isn't it? Like you have someone that everyone was saying on Twitter that he's going to commit suicide before testifying, and people were saying, "Oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. You're not supposed to say that." And then he commits suicide.
Maybe he was not supposed to be suicided either. I'm just saying.
There's just two explanations: either gross incompetence,
which is a reasonable explanation,
but it's such a gross incompetence that it begs the question, like, what is wrong with that system? And the second one is that someone either paid to have him assassinated or to look the other way as the man tries to assassinate himself. All of the possible options are unacceptable for a democratic country.
Really? It's not like the first time this happens. There have been similar cases, admittedly with inmates of less prominence, but nevertheless it has happened before, not just in the US, it happens in Europe as well. It's not particular. I mean, I have to admit, when I read the news that Epstein was suicided, which...
I thought it's a troll.
No, I didn't think it was a troll. I was like, yeah, of course.
Do you know that on 4chan it was revealed way before the media reported on it?
Of course. Was it on 4chan? Oh yeah, on 4chan.
2 hours before.
Because the full chan is down, isn't it?
Yeah, it got zooked or it got gulagged.
It got gulagged. Okay, yeah. What are you leaning towards? Was he suicided? Is it from the evidence that you have evaluated?
I find either he got suicided, but the way he got it is because someone was paid to make sure that they don't look in his cell when that took place. I mean, come on, the camera was offline. That is the most
Accidents happen, man. Now, the thing is that I enjoyed the drama on Twitter about 6 hours after the news broke out for the plebs. Because, there were people like, today there is the world is divided between people who believe outrageous conspiracies and mindless Democrat drones. Because the thing is that it's very difficult not to at least ask questions. And especially my viewers know that I'm usually very wary with these kinds of topics, in the sense that I avoid conspiracy theories as much as possible, because oftentimes you kind of happen to get wrong when you go into full conspiracy mode, and it's pretty hard to climb up from there. But in this particular case...
I read the definition of conspiracy theory. It's like people looking for more complicated answer when the obvious solution is there. And by this definition, I think the government is pushing conspiracy theories on the public.
I saw a comment on Twitter that was like, the fairy tale, the tooth fairy came in, and I'm like, that sounds more plausible than the official version.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's... I noticed that even the left and the right agree. But the only difference is that
at least the regular people,
like the blue check marks. Right? Like we're talking about the insanity levels here. Like even they say that he was killed. The only disagreement is that Trump got him assassinated versus Hillary Clinton got him assassinated.
Yeah, but it's pretty a far-fetched case, isn't it, to say that Trump got him assassinated? I mean, what would have been the worst that would happen? Epstein would have testified, I met Trump about 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he had ties with literally everyone that met
Almost
someone.
everyone, yeah.
So, like the fingers can be pointed at anyone, which is why they probably did it, because, who are you going to blame? Yeah, I mean, something that I found even more funny, and this is not because of a conspiracy theory or anything, it's just that I really laughed. Apparently, the medical examiner that did the autopsy also did the work for the JFK assassination and for Martin Luther King murder, and the guy's like 90 years old or something, and I was like,
someone had to be resurrected. Just...
Yeah, it's like, are they trying to convince people that it's a conspiracy?
Yeah, and it probably didn't help that the BBC was out in in less than 24 hours with, oh my God, there's so many conspiracies on the internet, man, and they're insane, it's far right. Give me a break.
Oh, the FBI published a document saying that people who push conspiracy theories should be considered like domestic terrorists, and this was before the guy killed himself.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that article because I retweeted it and said, if I happen to believe Epstein might have been suicided, that makes me, a terrorist threat, and in that case, I guess nothing is a terrorist threat anymore.
You're with the agitprop. Like, didn't you notice that when they label something a conspiracy theory, they don't even try to debunk it anymore? It's like, look, it's a conspiracy theory. If you don't shut up, we're going to ban you from social media.
Yeah, and this kind of approach is overall getting increasingly less effective. And that's because, it's one thing when you say, well, look, the flat earth theory is a conspiracy theory, just shut the fuck up. Give me a break. Yeah, but once you go further than that and you go into things that are at the very least questionable, that's when you get first you get the conspiracist loons who do exist, and those people tend to, push things around a little bit. But once you go into really high profile, like the Epstein suicide, which...
Basically, like disagreeing with the government official position, especially when a government that says, oh, there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
It's not even the government position here, it's just the position of the FBI. I mean, Trump doesn't seem to have an opinion, the federal government doesn't seem to have an opinion. It's like, I don't know, we should investigate. I have no idea what happened. So it's just a particular set of agents within the FBI who have an opinion, and we should all be listening to them.
No, but it's like, why wasn't the guy on a suicide watch? Like he tried to kill himself before, and now he was taken off suicide watch, and the two guards that were there were asleep, and the camera doesn't function.
The taking off of the suicide watch is probably the least weird thing. Usually this is true with almost all inmates. They're kept on suicide watch for maybe 4 days, 5 days. Epstein was already kept a little bit more than it should have been.
Yeah, but in such a high profile case.
Yeah, but they're routinely taken off sometimes when they shouldn't be. This has happened with many low level inmates as well. So that is to me not weird. But the guards being asleep, the camera
not working.
Conveniently not working exactly then, that's,
Winces being heard from his room.
That's a bit questionable at the very least. And keep in mind, I've spoken in the meantime with a prison guard here in Romania who overwatched several suicides, in the sense that he found the body in the cell. And I asked him, look, is this possible? And I had to translate things for him in Romanian. And he looked at things and was like, well, it is possible, but in the history of the 160 years of history of the Romanian penitentiary system, the way we know it today, there have been exactly 2 cases like this. So it's very rare. Now, I presume that since the US has the largest, allegedly, penitentiary system in the world, because nobody knows how many inmates China has, so, that's why I'm taking the...
Or North Korea.
Or North Korea, for that matter, But at least in the free world, the US has the largest penitentiary system. Maybe there it's more than 2 cases in 160 years, but it is reasonable to assume it's pretty rare. Even in the US.
It's a major case, It's not like Joe the Butcher that managed to commit suicide. And Butcher as the nickname, not the profession. No one cares about him other than his family, maybe. But you're talking about the case where all the international press was following. You're talking about a case where so many people were involved, and it wasn't to punish the guy, it was also to find out who else is involved.
Yeah, what he knows was more important than getting punishment for him. I presume that if he had stayed alive, most of the public would have been willing to accept a deal. Look, you give us everything you know and you get a shortened sentence.
Yeah, he already got a really good deal.
That was 10 years ago.
You would never get such a deal.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I don't think any regular person could even begin to hope of getting such a deal.
Yeah, he was caught with child trafficking for years, and what happened was that they only gave him like a couple of months.
Yeah, and that was also in, judiciary control or something like that.
and he could just go out from the prison to do his job and stuff, and it was, Another case that's also recently that should shake the faith of the Americans in the justice system was the Smollett incident. Like the prosecutor just dropped the charges.
Yes, yes. I think with the Justice Smollett, the thing is, I've just been to Chicago about a year ago. And during my stay in Chicago, I got to meet a lot of officials. I got to understand how that city works. Let me put it this way. If you think Romania is corrupt, let's think it in terms of football leagues. If corruption would have been a football league, Chicago would be playing at the very least for the UEFA Cup spots, if not for a Champions League spot. And Romania would not be in the first two divisions.
Yeah, I keep telling that to other Romanians. They don't believe it.
Yeah, they don't believe it. But just try building something in Chicago. There, the bribe is legalized.
yeah. Like a lot of people are like, oh my God, bribery in Romania. In the European Union, they call it lobbying.
Yeah. Well, it's not even lobbying. I mean, with the City Hall of Chicago, you have things like, oh, you need to renovate the facade of your building. That's so nice. You have to pay $30,000 in cash to the City Hall. Just in cash, you can't pay it via bank wiring, to basically the mob official of the City Hall, just for the permit to renovate. Then you have to pay another additional fee, which that one you can pay via bank transfer, in order to get the permit to block the street a little bit because you're renovating your facade and goes
Jesus.
Straight. Yeah, welcome to Chicago. And that's the small-time corruption. Then there's the big-time corruption. You want to build a huge building? Oh, that's interesting. You have to budget in the project at least 20% just for bribery, essentially.
My favorite part is in the European Union, the European Commission was accused of working with the mafia. So the European Commission suspended itself, the European Commission investigated itself, and the European Commission came to the conclusion that it's not working with the mafia.
Yes. I mean, with the European Commission, don't get me started, we'll be here until tomorrow, just with the cases that I know off the top of my head. So yeah, the Justice Smollett case, that was interesting. Right. What's your take on the Democrats? Have you watched the debates?
Oh my God, yeah. I had to brush up on my Spanish a little bit. I wanted to go to America, but I understand I don't speak American very well. A lot of people are like, oh, what do you mean you don't speak American? That's English. No, it doesn't seem to be English.
If you ask the Democrats, it should not be English.
Let's see. Open borders, pretty much. Not in name, but in policy.
Open borders in everything but in name only.
Americans should pay for the rest of the health insurance for everyone in the world. Because I'm thinking, I'm trying to explain to these people, if you change the system, people will take advantage of it. Of course. Like, if you're telling me I can go to America and get healthcare, for me, it's going to be the question of how much is the plane ticket versus how much do I need to pay in order to get healthcare here. So a lot of people are just going to do these.
Depends on the healthcare. I mean, at some point it might be cheaper to get it here, but that's because we live pretty far away from the US. But I think from Mexico, it's probably a good deal to just take the car, drive all the way to the US, and in fact, I hear that this is already happening in California, where they kind of do provide some healthcare services on the taxpayer dole to illegals. So you got Mexicans who just drive all the way to California, get the healthcare they want, and then they drive back. They don't have
It's just mind-boggling. I'm generally thinking, if I was, a white man, because that's what I was born. That's what I am. If I was born in America and I'm looking at Democratic debates, the only person that would actually offer me something that I would be like, okay, this might be something for me, would be maybe Tulsi Gabbard saying no more dead American soldiers. That's something I might relate. But other than that, what are they offering, to the American voter? There were even Democrats that went into Mexico to campaign. I'm like, well, just invade Mexico, annex it, make it the 51st state or how many,
Yeah, that would be a very sweet deal for the Mexicans, but I presume that the rest of the American taxpayers won't particularly. By the way, speaking of annexing countries, Trump proposed buying Greenland.
I haven't looked into that recently, but I think it's a joke.
Well, although offers for Greenland have been made in the past, and the United States has a pretty strong rap sheet of buying territory.
The Louisiana Purchase.
Alaska. It doesn't sound pretty Anglo-American to me. That's because it was Russian, but it was bought. So yeah, Puerto Rico, I think it was bought as well. And also there were offers of territory swap versus shekels with the Spanish Empire. I mean, it's not something really uncommon. I mean, it sounds weird when you look from a Danish perspective, who they are usually, their Viking history says you just invade, kill everyone.
Yeah, you pay the price of iron,
yeah. So, from a Danish perspective, maybe sounds weird, but from an American perspective, offering to pay money for territory is not something that.
Yeah, I don't think the Danes would even take it because they're not in an economic problem. If they were Greece, maybe.
It really does depend how much America offers. I mean, you have to understand that keeping Greenland is a huge cost for Denmark because, it's pretty far away from the mainland and it has only 55,000 people. And,
Why does America want Greenland?
For strategical purposes.
Oh, of course. Military?
Yes, because it's very close to Russia and it's easier to defend the northern flank through Greenland than it is to defend it through northern Norway, which is a lot less of a hospitable land. Greenland may be a little bit frozen, but it's still much better to navigate than most of northern Norway. So yeah, there are the Svalbard archipelago. I mean, for strategical reasons,
I'm more fascinated about
Greenland being U.S. territory. No.
I wonder what the people in Greenland would have to say about it. They'll probably get good business because of the military bases.
Well, for starters, they would finally get some free speech for starters. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, it doesn't sound like a bad idea for the Greenlanders either. I'm just saying.
I'm more fascinated about the Space Force that Trump wants to make. And I think that actually is going to be for the future. Think about it. If you take down the satellites of another nation, they can't use GPS, they can't use tracking beacons for their missiles. So I don't think they're going to send astronauts into space, but maybe drones and things that.
Well, that is already feasible today, but the thing is that you have to take down all of the satellites. Otherwise, even if you do take down the Chinese satellites, what's the problem in uploading the same frequency into other civilian satellites that are easily hackable? They're back online within.
Well, probably that's what the people from the Space Force have to consider.
Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of space junk out there as well. Of course, and that's okay. I mean, that's the mark of a thriving civilization. But it's a bit more complicated than that. Soon enough, I guess we'll be seeing space greenies. The Green Party hasn't been busy too much in campaigning.
The Communist Party.
The space. The Communist Party used to put people in space or dogs or whatever.
Want me to demonetize this video? Just talk against the environment, and point out what the environmentalists are doing that is shady, and you're going to see YouTube demonetize.
Well, I'm thinking about eventually doing a video on the Greta Thunberg cult. So, I'm just saying.
Well, let me tell you something from my town, because this boggles my mind. So the mayor decided in his infinite wisdom to cut down all the trees from many neighborhoods.
I've read in the media about that, yeah.
And then he also says, all right, we're going to have free parking space for electric cars. And I don't think anyone owns an electric car in my country, in my town, sorry. So what happens?
There's no one with a Tesla in Yash?
I don't think so.
Surprised.
I mean, if there are, I would be bewildered. But what happens is that you find these parking spaces empty. So the person goes with the car, finds that he can't park and starts going the merry-go-round around the mall, polluting as he does, 2 or 3 circles. And it's just, goes to show what the environmentalists always do. It's like they give you something that sounds good on paper, and it kind of makes sense.
There's a reason it has mental in the name. I mean, I'm just saying. I'll reserve that for a special video for the Greta Thunberg cult. By the way, when I was in Germany in May, they had the running propaganda for the Greta Thunberg cult everywhere. Oof. You could not go in any German city anywhere except the very conservative suburbs where they didn't.
Do they have something like that?
Oh yeah, they do. Come on, Germany is a large country. There's still pockets of sanity in it. But in the big cities, no.
I think they're exporters of insanity.
Well, that's Germany's historical duty, isn't it? I mean, it just seems that the whole of Europe has to suffer from
behind every European tragedy, there is a smiling German.
Well, except for the French Revolution, which is a smiling French Polish communist. But except for that, yes, there's a lot of smiley Germans out there, or Austrian, generally German speakers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they had Make Our Planet Greta again.
Oh my god.
Yes, and it was fucking everywhere. If I find the footage, I'll put it when I edit this video. If I don't, you'll have to trust my word and put it sometime else. But damn, it was everywhere. And it was really funny to then read, I think it was in the Bild anyway, in a German paper, that once the school year ended, suddenly the attendance to the climate strike protests, whatever, just dropped to like almost zero, or like 3 people.
Right. The way I convince climate change activists is that, look, I will give you the fact that it's man-made. I will give you everything you want. But let's look at what is the solution, all right? The solution is more government taxes. Where does the money go to? Does it go for research in order to try to reverse the process? Does it go to plant more trees? Does it go, to build better highways so that... No, it usually goes to some social programs like healthcare or, like big government...
or investing in technologies that don't work.
Well, I kind of get that because you have, like, when you talk about inventions, you have to fail 10 times before you get something.
Yeah, but why should it be failed on taxpayers' dole? I mean, just recently in Germany, they're taking down an entire highway that was built with the promise to be the greenest highway in the world. And when it was built, there were assholes like me who said that ain't gonna work, like never. And 3 years later,
solar roadways.
Yeah, solar highway. I mean, the Germans, they usually come up with this kind of insanity. And after 3 years, they're realizing that it's cheaper to just dismantle it than to keep having
maintaining it.
Yeah, because the maintenance costs just went through the roof. Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah, and usually, like, the people who vote Greens are the bourgeoisie, white middle class soy latte boys who,
It's definitely true in Germany, where like 80% of the media is Green Party voters, or 75% of How is that the representative media? Because, nationwide, the Green Party...
the same with the United Kingdom. I think it's the same with everywhere, with the media.
Well, in the United Kingdom, I guess on the Brexit issue, the media is very polarized, mostly
they're
against...
labor activists. Like most of them, they have labor affiliations.
I don't think the UK is a good example, because at least there you still have a Daily Mail, you still have a Daily Telegraph, you still have some sort of media diversity from an ideology. You still have The Sun, which is still a very large circulation paper. So you still have some diversity, although admittedly, if you look at the BBC and The Guardian, you're gonna go, Christ almighty.
Yeah, but they're the ones setting the narrative, aren't they?
They used to be, not anymore, not so much. I mean,
the BBC isn't setting the narrative?
Not anymore, not to the same extent. I mean, 20 years ago, if the BBC said something, that was the narrative, and if you were lucky as a political operative, maybe you'd get to deconstruct it within weeks or maybe several months. Nowadays, the BBC starts high, but sometimes within hours their narrative collapses, and sometimes they have to change it in real time.
I remember reading this article from the BBC with the EU elections, and they were like, all the parties from the EU explained, and I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Let's see what policies the Lib Dems have, what policies the Tories have, and it was like, the Tories. This guy was accused of Islamophobia. This guy was accused of this and that. Then they went like they went Brexit Party. Nigel Farage went on InfoWars with Alex Jones. And it was it was just like personal attacks. And I was thinking, holy shit, this is just drama. Like their entire press is focused on keeping the population away from politics, from thinking about actual political issues like policies and principles. It's just to keep them entertained, like bread and circus for the masses.
Yeah, well, that's again, it's a very black-pilled vision, but it's still true. It's the inevitable result of democracy. Once you involve the plebs into decisions that they should have no business in making them to begin with.
Yeah, but it's not even the plebs. It's the multi-billion-dollar corporations and the people that are in power and want to cling to that power.
Yeah, and one way to cling to that power, because you still are reliant on the votes of the plebs. If only the wealthy and the people who have earned their shekels would only vote, then you would have to convince those people, and bullshit doesn't tend to work to those people. Yeah, maybe it works with some of them. There are a lot of stupid wealthy people, but most wealthy people are not stupid. Yeah. So you can't sell them, Nigel Farage went to InfoWars. Tell that to a small business owner in Glasgow. Like,
no, but the wealthy person that might have ties to the Labour Party might be like, of course, yeah. But the thing is, like, if you don't have democracy and you have dictatorship, then they don't care what the people want. Like, look at North Korea or China.
But I'm not saying the dictatorship. I mean, first of all, let's start small. how about not everyone gets to vote? You know, I mean, in the European Union, it has gone to pretty insane levels. I mean, you and I could go to a German town and just set up a PO box there. It costs us 10 euros together, or maybe 15 euros, and boom, we have voting rights in their local elections. That's insane.
It is, but you can't vote for important things. You know, have you voted
Are you kidding me?
Have you voted for Ursula?
No, but I could have voted for the man who essentially proposed her, and because you know, again, once you get local elections in Germany, means also Bundesland level. And if you happen to move into Bavaria or North Rhine-Westphalia, you know, the Bundeslands that matter.
Yeah, they're trying
You can vote for pretty much important stuff without ever being German or ever paying taxes in Germany.
They're trying to coin the idea that the European Union is a country now. And you're not Romanian, you're European. So, you know, it's like in the United States, I guess. If you're in Chicago, you can go to Texas and you can vote in Texas, you know.
Yeah, but even there, the process is a little bit more difficult.
It's more difficult and it's more democratic. Like the Ursula thing, I don't know if you followed it, there was only one name on the list that people voted.
Oh, of course.
Like even under Ceausescu, you
still have a lame duck candidate against him, yes. Yes, the situation with the voting for the European Commission is, but I'm not surprised by that, and I don't understand why you are surprised. I mean, the European
because people,
Union...
I've recently looked into the European Union. Most people don't understand how it functions. They think that the European Parliament makes the laws.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't
make the laws. They can't repeal legislation.
Yeah, they can only reject proposals from the Politburo. Sorry, I mean the Commission, and the Supreme Soviet only gets to vote yay or nay. But once they voted yay, then they can't change their mind. The Supreme Soviet, sorry, I mean the European Parliament cannot change its mind. And
I read this interesting thing. I don't know if it's true or not, but it sounded plausible. So maybe you know better. Apparently, like after Margaret Thatcher came into power, they completely destroyed the left wing within the West, and they were worried that they will never be elected again. So they tried to create the European Union and make it as close as possible to the Soviet system, so that in the future they could fuse and make just one big super state. They didn't expect that Gorbachev would come in and dismantle the Soviet system. But if you look at the European Union, and I'm not talking ideologically, but politically, it has a lot of things in common with the way the Soviets used to run things.
That's absolutely true. What I don't find plausible is the portion that because of Thatcher they got afraid. No. These things were planned since the 60s, long before Thatcher was even conceiving of ever being prime minister or even the chief of her classmates. So, I mean, no. This has been, I mean, if you look at the speeches of what they called their founding fathers, you know, Jean Monnet and all the rest, they were envisioning something like this. And again, this was an idea, but since Margaret Thatcher was a freaking teenager, so no. At best, maybe there was some correlation, although even that, I mean, the treaty that created the EU as we know it today, the Maastricht Treaty, yes, it was signed in 92, 1 year after Thatcher was forced to step down from power, but it was written during Thatcher's tenure, and most of its concepts were thought before Thatcher even became a prime minister. So,
do you think the European Union will collapse in the future?
It kind of has to, either through irrelevance or through more Soviet-style collapse. It kind of has to, because
the bureaucracy is insane.
Yeah, the same thing with the Soviet Union. Once it stopped expanding, it went into deep trouble. That's the problem with the EU.
They want to expand in Africa. If you look at
they want to, but has someone tried to ask the Africans? Because, you know, where do you expand? Well, Libya is not exactly a country. I'm pretty sure Egypt is not very keen on the European Commission telling them what to do. I'm pretty sure the King of Morocco, and with his old troubles in Western Sahara, doesn't exactly qualify for EU membership. So where else?
I don't know. Guy Verhofstadt actually said where he wants. I forgot the place, but the idea is that,
of course, Guy Verhofstadt.
In the future, it's not going to be called European Union. It's going to be called the Union, and it's going to have like free travel between Africa and Europe. And
yeah, that's all nice and well until you actually go to Africa, which I have. And realize that's a little bit more complicated than that. Yeah, sure, of course they don't care.
For them, the people are just numbers on a paper.
Yeah, sure.
And the resources are just, you know, percentages that they can exploit. And
Sure. I'm not saying they won't attempt to. I'm just saying that it's not going to work according to the plan. I mean, people don't realize just how many armed militias are in Africa, like everywhere.
My favorite.
Good luck convincing those people that they should be listening to the huge blue and stars flag, and there's some.
Well, usually it depends. I mean, how much free shit they give, like if they.
You'll be surprised how expensive the armed militias can be. I mean, it's not as complicated. It's not as simple as.
Well, the EU army needs to be deployed somewhere.
Yeah, good luck building the EU army. That's a little bit more complicated. It turns out to be a lot more complicated than people think. Because again, you can integrate the bureaucracies. Yeah, sure, the top brass of all of the militaries of EU member states. Yeah, you can integrate those, although most of those are already integrated under NATO. So yeah, that's easy. The hard part is, how do you convince a peasant from Finland to go and fight in, Central African Republic for the glory of the European Union?
Very simple, I'll tell you how.
How?
Didn't you notice how many migrants have recently came that have no attachment?
That's why I specifically chose Finland, because, in Finland there aren't that many of them, and in the military even less.
Yeah, look at how many, people came from foreign places that have no cultural or, ties to Europe.
Your roots, yeah.
Yeah, and then they'll be like, you don't even need to learn the language, like we're going to have an officer that speaks in your language, and you're going to get like 3,000, 4,000 euros per month if you join in. They don't need that many people. Like the war nowadays is fought usually with technology.
Yeah, that's true when you're fighting technologically somewhat equal powers. I mean, yeah, sure, when you're dealing with Russia or even the Islamic Republic of Iran, sure, that's true. But again, have you been to Africa? Because I have. You're not fighting with drones with those people. No, you have to go physically in the jungle to root them out. Good luck with that. It's a lot more complicated than
I think
people
the EU army, and I'm really afraid of this, that it might be deployed against member states.
I'm sure that will be attempted. I'm sure that...
Because think about it, like if they don't have any attachments to the land, it's like they don't care. They get 4,000 euros to Mr. Ahmed that came from Sudan. He's like the protesters.
I'm pretty sure that at least I don't think it will necessarily happen, but it will for sure be attempted, just like in the Soviet Union it was attempted. Until then, there is the issue of Deutsche Bank. Have you been following the economics of the European Union?
The Deutsche Bank is very unhappy that they might get a no-deal Brexit.
Oh yeah, and the no-deal Brexit is very low. It should be very low on their priorities list. I mean, they have derivative exposure about 4.5 times the GDP of Germany. Nobody can bail out that shit.
Do you think the eastern states are going to start complaining more about the EU? Because most of the countries in the east, and even Romania, they like the EU because of the gravy train. But once the gravy train stops coming...
there you go. And the thing is that the gravy train will have to at least take a break, if not a full stop.
And we got 2 new countries now.
The thing is that, again, nobody can bail out Deutsche Bank. It's just too large. Who's going to bail it?
It's going to default, probably.
And once that happens, I mean, people will start remembering. You remember when the good old days when we were all worried about Lehman Brothers? Yeah, that was heaven, mate. Remember about Deutsche Bank?
Yeah, it's going to be like Romanians. They're going to be like, what the fuck do I care that the Deutsche Bank went bankrupt? Like, did I have any decisions to make with the Deutsche Bank? Did I?
No. Yeah, and it's not just Romanians again, and probably we're a little bit off sync a little bit. The Poles are a little bit more on sync with this, and some
Hungarians.
Hungarians not so much really.
Really, I thought the V4 is.
Well, it's called the V4, but it's actually V1. It's Poland, and that's it.
The Czech.
Yeah, because the Czechs have been in sync with everyone else in rejecting migrants. That's awesome, but not so much on anything else. Slovakia has elected a very progressive president, it's going to be a little bit iffy. And Mr. Orban is first and foremost interested in making shekels for himself. I mean, everything else is...
I don't know. I mean, Eastern Europe, everyone's corrupt. But he managed to at least maintain a populist rhetoric that can exist, even after he steps down.
So. Sure. The thing is that it's still debatable how successful. I mean, his wall was successful, but overall, Budapest has gotten incredibly. I mean, I go to Budapest at least once a year, usually twice or thrice a year, since 2013. Budapest has gotten a lot of diversity and progress that didn't exist in 2013. I'm just saying.
Well, most capitals of the world have.
I don't know. Warsaw didn't come up as really that diverse, and I've just been to Warsaw, Warsaw. So no, it's. I'm just saying it's not as simple. I'm
not against diversity, but I am against like millions of people just coming in one year without any way of integrating or assimilating them.
And admittedly, integrating and assimilating into the Hungarian society is probably very bloody complicated because
their language is the hardest in the world.
I don't think it's the hardest in the world. I've studied worse.
You speak Korean?
I understand a little bit. I sometimes speak a little bit. It's difficult because it's not a European language.
Yeah.
And as a result, it makes it very difficult.
The language of the colonized.
Yes, and most of the immigrants, yes, they do come from Africa, but they still come speaking a European language. Either they speak Portuguese if they come from Mozambique or whatever, or they speak English, or they speak French. Maybe they speak Arabic, but still something really far away from the family of the Hungarian language. It's very difficult to get integrated into the Hungarian language. I mean, people complain about the Polish language.
Why would you choose to go somewhere if you don't want to integrate? This is what boggles my mind. And I usually ask leftists this, and they don't know what to say. It's like, look, if I travel to Saudi Arabia, do you think Saudi Arabia has a duty to become more Romanian, or am I the one that has to
stop? Or at the very least more Christian? I mean, that would be nice.
Yeah, or am I the one that's going to stop having to drink alcohol, stop having to have extramarital affairs and live by their customs? Like I chose to go there. I made the decision. Like why am I the one complaining?
Yeah, and it's the same thing that you were asking me when we taped the previous video that with the whole culture. We need to have diversity on the screen in the cast, and I'm like. Does anyone complain about the lack of diversity in Bollywood movies?
Yeah, no, I make this on my channel all the time. I pointed out, it's like there are so many Chinese films that
are 100% or 99% Han Chinese, which is the dominant ethnic group in China.
Not only that, they copy American movies and they remove all the diversity. It's like, and then they have Chinese. There's you need to go on YouTube and look for Bollywood Superman and Spider-Woman.
That sounds like something Top Kick.
It is Top Kick, and I just don't put it on your channel because it gets copyright claim. But like all of Bollywood does the same, and I don't understand the problem. Like I grew up with Chinese kung fu movies, with Jackie Chan and shit. And
the Jackie Chan movies were almost all taped in Hong Kong, and almost all of them had Han Chinese cast. And at best, you had a token American, maybe.
Yeah, and the left is coming and telling me I shouldn't like these movies because I don't find the white person in there. That's their argument, right? Yeah, they're saying I shouldn't be able to enjoy a kung fu film or a Bollywood movie because there's no white people in it, and I'm like, holy shit, that's
more representation and shit.
I'm like, well, that's very Hitleresque of you.
Yeah, it is in a way. This is what I was discussing with my friend Lloyd de Jong in Warsaw. That it's a very Nazi way of looking at the world. That if you don't have the correct phenotype, that therefore it's haram. And I'm like,
yeah, they basically have the blood and soil thing. Like when they say. For example, in South Africa, you get to read just harrowing stories coming from the news with white farmers being beaten, and they justify it. It's like, well, it's the black person's land, and it's like, hold on a little bit.
Maybe it's not.
No. If that's the case, well, if a person comes into America and he's not from there, when they say go back to your country, you should agree with that. Are you using blood and soil arguments here? No, they're citizens of South Africa. They have citizenship. You don't know how they got their land. Some of them probably moved even after and just purchased it with money. Like you can't there just say, they're white and therefore.
Even better is to use the arguments of my friend Lloyd de Jong. During apartheid in 50 years, they had 7,300 murders in 50 years during the oppressive white man's regime. In the first year after apartheid, they had like 27,000 murders in the first year.
Yeah, it's what happens when you have a dictatorship. You have this in Iraq as well. You have the Kurds, the Sunni, and the Shias, and when Saddam is in power, there are no murders because people are terrorized, right? But the moment the dictator goes away, you have all these ancient grievances and grudges and people that are doing agitprop in order to benefit from it. So yeah, I mean.
Yeah, but there are certain areas, and I've only learned this after traveling to them. I mean, if you were to have told me this 10 years ago, I would have said, well, that's probably not the case. Now, after I travel to them, I start to understand the point of view that, look, some areas maybe should not be democratic, at least yet.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just the way it is.
I was finding out about this woman who traveled into Somalia to show that it's a great place.
She died in an Islamist terrorist attack.
And the moment I found out about it, I was just, how is she going to do it? Because I saw like some documentaries about Somalia, and the guy who went there, I think it was actually the BBC, he hired 8 gunmen. Like they were armed to the teeth, and like the guy was just walking on the street, and he had like 4 people in front, 4 people in the back, and
that's how we traveled to Somalia.
Yeah, because it's a lawless place, Well, it does have some sort of government, but you can't rely on it, right?
Yeah. The only place in Somalia where you can rely is in Somaliland, which has apparently gotten better.
Yeah.
And it's funny because there's essentially no government. They're living the uncapped dream. We'll see how long that. I'm looking very close to that because it's one way to either I'll get proven wrong, and because I usually say that.
Well, the question is, what shit do you have, and does someone want your shit? Because if you live in uncapped dream and then some country wants your shit.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they'll win. Maybe they'll eventually create their own separate Somaliland republic or whatever. We'll see what happens. It's a very interesting case. But the rest of what is internationally recognized as Somalia today is a place where you shouldn't be going.
Yeah, so to finish my argument, I was like wondering, how is she going to show how the beauty of Somalia while being surrounded by gunmen, And apparently she went without gunmen and she got killed. And these Americans don't get it. You live in the best country in the world and you have security and, police, fascist police. Yeah, that fascist police protects your ass. And when you go to a place where you don't have the fascist police, you start begging for the fascist police.
You suddenly realize that maybe some fascist police would be great. Yeah, I've had the chance of meeting the fascist police in Chicago and in Indiana, and especially in Indiana, they're some of the nicest people I've ever met. And I've been to a lot of places.
They probably get a lot of shit, and when they find someone that actually likes them, they're like,
yeah, they're very nice, and they really aren't looking for trouble. But if you insist, yeah, sure, they'll be a little bit fucked up.
They will oblige, yeah.
Yeah, but just don't insist. In fact, you can even talk back to them and be, kind of nasty with them.
Yeah, in our country it's illegal. It's called ultrage.
Well, it depends. It depends. It's a little bit more complicated because, if you just curse at the police,
if they want to give you a fine for ultrage, they have the legal grounds and the legal framework to do so.
Yeah, sure. And you then contest it in the court of law and you always win. Trust me, I've done this several times.
Well, I know at law school, I mean, unless they change the legislation, if you flip the bird to a cop, they can actually say that you insulted a member of the public.
Yeah, sure. But then no court of law will uphold it. So
no, that's a different thing then. But
yeah, so if you're dumb enough and pay the fine, that's on you. You can just go to it costs like €1 to initiate a lawsuit against it and just say, look, this is bullshit. And most judges will agree with you because most judges know that some police officers are easily offended.
Speaking of Romanian police, what do you make of the Caracal case?
I'll try to stay away from that, especially on this channel. It's just like it's a case that has it just fits a lot of narratives.
I actually digged into it. One of the narratives is like, why didn't they triangulate her phone? The reason is that she wasn't using a phone with GPS. She was using a very old...
A phone like I use.
Yeah, the paranoid man phone. Do you have ladies that you kidnap? That you have phones that... What do you have to hide?
I saw one of those arguments. Oh, why did the criminal have 3 phones? And I'm like, I have 4. Do you want to see my bag of bodies as well? No, the thing is that this case just happened to come at a very... politically convenient moment.
People are going to milk. Like I keep hearing it.
It was already a culture where it kind of has some bit of disdain for the police, And then this gross incompetence comes in, and it was very inconvenient.
It is gross incompetence, and it shows.
And also, the case itself fits a lot of narratives. It fits, it also fit. The feminists tried to piggyback on it. They got absolutely shredded for their attempt. I mean, even the left-wing activists at G4 Media told the feminists just fuck off. Come on, get lost. But nevertheless, it fits it fits the feminist narrative. It fits the anti-police narrative. It fits the Muie PSD narrative. It fits a lot of narratives at the same time. This is the kind of case that appears about once in 100 years.
Yeah, like what I notice is that when I talk about a tragedy, and Google doesn't let you monetize tragedies because you're not CNN and you don't know how to properly.
Yeah, only CNN is allowed.
You don't know how to properly milk a shekel from a tragedy. But every time there's a tragedy, people are like, "Oh, why are you politicizing it?" And I actually ask people, it's like, look, I'm in a live stream now. There's 500 people watching. Can one of you tell me a tragedy that wasn't politicized? Just one tragedy. They couldn't. No one could name one tragedy, right? So. Yeah, when you have something like this, a lot of people are going to have like confirmation bias that everything that I thought, and if you just implement the thing that I'm saying is going to be good. But the case itself, the thing that annoys me is that we live in the IT country, people who are into IT, they get a lot of discounts and don't pay as much taxes. And they couldn't have like a 911 service that works,
a similar case to this one with, but it wasn't with a serial killer. It was with just a bunch of dumb tourists. They've been looking for them for a week in Italy. It happened like this week. So they still haven't found them as of 4 hours ago. Last time when I checked the news, so 5 hours ago. Yeah. So I mean, this kind of incompetence with the 911, well, actually 112 in Europe, is not as uncommon as people think. It's true.
Oh, there was even one that was more gross, and I don't know why it's not talked about in the press. Apparently, someone managed to see a site that you don't usually expect to find in public, a girl with blood all over her legs.
Yeah. By the way, that case turned out to be that's why it disappeared from the press. Because the girl was on her period.
Really?
Yes.
Apparently, she claimed she was raped.
Yeah, of course she did, because that's what they do when they are coached by their psychologists. But then when it came to writing,
but even then, all right, like even then, if you're a cop,
sure,
and you find
cops absolutely botched that case.
So my point was that must be I want to hire that woman because she is so persuasive. Like you can win any argument. Like if you can walk on the streets covered in blood and the police comes and it's like, is there any problem, ma'am? Nope, no problem whatsoever. And the police say, "Well, who am I to disagree?"
Sure. That's absolutely true. Oh no, so I thought you were talking about the case with the minor, not with the case with the adult. The one with the adult woman, I'm not familiar.
No, the minor.
Oh, the one with the minor. The minor was just on her period, and it was unfortunate. And yes, the police totally fucked it up.
But still,
but the rest of the narrative built around the case collapsed almost immediately. That's why it disappeared from the press.
Because, I don't care about the narrative. Like every country.
Well, I do, because that's my
you're the agitprop man, but. Every country has criminals.
Of course.
And I really hate the fuck the police narrative because it's always, it's not fuck Officer John or fuck Officer Bob.
Yeah, give us names of specific officers.
No, all of the police. All of them. And it's never like when someone does good, it's like, oh, well, it's his job to do good. Yeah, but don't you think you're misleading the public because not talking about the good things that they do?
They do know they're misleading the public, but they don't fucking care. Why should they?
Yeah.
Because again, it's their job to do the agitation on that, and the police is not smart enough. I mean, they had one moment, at one point, they had that guy, what was he? Godina something.
Yeah.
Who was doing essentially pro-police agitprop. The thing is that in order for his agitprop to work, it would have required at least 7 years of the police not fucking it up badly. And for about 4 years, they weren't. And suddenly the image of the police had gotten more positive. But then, August the 10th happened, and a lot of cases in the last exactly 1 year have happened, and we just collapsed 4 years of agitprop. So, after the Caracal case, we're going to have to start all over.
Yeah, it's a lot more easy to find, if you have especially a big group of people, to find someone that doesn't follow what he's supposed to do. It's a lot easier to point it out than to defend, an entire...
Yeah, and it also doesn't make it... it's a lot easier, especially when it's a spectacular fuck-up. A group spectacular fuck-up. Because, one police officer being an idiot on the street, yeah, sure, that happens everywhere. It doesn't really go viral. But the Caracal case is a little bit stronger than that. It was just a collective fuck up in a way that it's very hard to. On the other hand,
I kind of buy the narrative that maybe some people there are involved in child prostitution.
We'll see about
There's
that.
a lot of cases. Like if you Google Caracal and you have the option in Google to set the time date, and you go from last year all the way to 1990. There's over 40 missing people, missing kids, and the investigations into child trafficking and stuff there. And you don't have child trafficking if the government doesn't, the authorities doesn't allow it.
or at least the local authorities, maybe not the central government, but surely the local, at least someone has to know something.
But think about this: if you kidnap a girl from Romania, right, and you want to sell her to Italy in order to do prostitution, how do you pass her the border?
Oh, that's not complicated.
How?
Well, I don't think I'm at liberty to discuss that in front of the camera.
All right. But if
I'll tell you after we shut down the camera.
That's why you have 4 phones. Eh? But the thing is, there is some government corruption going on there.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, you'll be surprised how easy it is to get out from Romania. Getting in is a little bit more complicated because usually the border patrol, especially nowadays, they're very careful at illegal immigrants. Because very few people try to illegally get out of Romania, because you can just get out through any checkpoint. It's not complicated. It's a very not complicated procedure. It takes 30 seconds. So
why does Romania care if someone wants to leave?
Well, that's what. One of the reasons is well, first of all, we're not in Schengen, so we still enforce our borders, which is great. And second of all, it's precisely for these kinds of cases. You need a license to get a minor out of the country. Adults can do whatever the fuck they want, but with minors, you need a license to get the minor out.
Do we separate kids at the border?
No, we don't. Although I think we should. But sadly, we don't. Well, admittedly, there have been exactly one case of that when the migrants were trying to get in through the Black Sea. But our version of ICE, the General Inspectorate...
Our concentration camps were functioning, yeah?
Yeah, no, they weren't fully built yet, and they just deported them all as a family.
I saw this immigrant family pissing their eyes on TV because they got fingerprinted in Romania. And I was like,
tough shit.
And I was like, what the fuck does getting fingerprinted mean, right? And then I found out that if you get fingerprinted in an EU country, you have to stay here.
Yeah. Either that or you get deported. I presume that if they had a criminal record, they probably get deported immediately. Your asylum request isn't even processed anymore. No, you got a criminal record, that's your plane, fuck off.
Oh, you know what? You know the feminist argument about teach men not to rape? It's like if you teach a woman to defend herself, and I spoke with this with a feminist professor, if you teach a woman to defend herself...
You have a lot of spare time. To talk to feminist professors without witnesses, that means having a lot of spare time.
And she basically said that if a woman, for example, would avoid getting into the guy from Caracal's car, wouldn't that mean that the next day some other woman would have got in? So like the problem is still there?
Maybe not. The thing is that, again, the Caracal case is the kind of case that emerges about once in 100 years. What's interesting is that about a few years ago, there was another serial killer, this time in Bucharest. I've tried this morning to remember his name. I couldn't.
Romano?
No. That was that was 50.
One.
No.
We have more than one serial killer?
Oh, of course. There's 3 just in the post-communist.
Just lie to me.
So first of all, there's Marius Ciampar, who's still alive, and I think in the Gherla penitentiary, either Gherla or Balta Albă. So Marius Ciampar, who used to kill hobos, he was a hobo himself and was killing other hobos. And got caught essentially by accident because nobody's overwatching.
How many did he?
I think 7 victims confirmed. Although he insists that he has 10, and I tend to believe him. He probably knows better. The second one is the killer that I'm reminding.
What if he does stolen valor?
The what?
Stolen valor.
I don't know. I don't know. The second one is the case broke out several years ago, and the reason I still remember about it is because his last victim was someone that a friend of mine was expecting to arrive and didn't.
Jesus.
It was a Japanese citizen who arrived in Bucharest and was supposed to stay.
Oh, the cannibal?
That one. Yeah. So that's the second one. The third one is this one, Dinka in Caracal. That's only after 1990. Then before 1990 is Romaro and his father.
Oh, yeah. His dad
so there's these 2. And then there's before World War II, there's Vera Renzi, a woman. And then before that, there is another one, I forget his name, from Iași.
Still not that many compared to other countries, but...
Well, yeah, 6 serial killers in 100 years, that's pretty within the range of standard operating procedure.
Let's look at the US.
Well, even in the US, if you take it on a per capita level, they don't get that much higher. Yeah, they seem many, but people still forget. I mean, the US is a gigantic
it's like a continent,
place. I mean, especially after I have been there to the US myself, I've realized just how big the place is. I mean, think about it this way: just the circle around around the city of Houston is larger than the surface of the Netherlands.
Wow.
I mean, that, it's just, the tiny suburbs through which the road loops.
It's basically like more nations that are a conglomerate. It's actually the size of a continent.
Yeah, and the city where I did the report about the Islamist infiltration, Dearborn, Michigan, that city is of the size of Yash County, and it's considered a small town. I mean, people don't realize just how big the United States is. I mean, and Texas is larger than 2 Germanys. And, there's a different scale.
I love
there.
Marseille, twice the same as well.
No, so, yeah, sure, the US has a lot of serial killers, but, on a per capita basis, on a historical record, there aren't that many. Maybe they have slightly more, and that's because in the US, historically, not anymore today, but historically, people with relatively unnormal ways immigrated there. Because who immigrated there? First of all, it was the religious Puritans.
They called it transportation.
Yeah, first of all, it was the religious Puritans. Then it was those who seek adventure. Again, unnormal ways. Not necessarily bad, but unnormal. Then you had some criminals too. Then you had entrepreneurs. And, entrepreneurs in Europe tend to be pretty rare today because most of them moved to America where you could. It was, and of course, along those many abnormal groups of people, some of them, of course, ended up being, abnormally criminal as well. And some of them ended up being...
Yeah, they would punish people in Britain with transportation. It means that you got on a ship, they send you to the New World, and if you came back, they would kill you. So.
Yeah, and then there is also the issue that the Americans have developed an entire subculture of glorifying serial killers. I mean, people don't realize...
Hollywood and...
Serial killers who are not put to death, they get love mail. Like fan letters, and not just a few of them. No, like by the hundreds. You have to.
That's so weird.
Yeah, because people are not stupid. People are fucking stupid, and you'll be surprised how
they're fucking stupid. Yes. Like literally.
Yes. Yes, and you'll be surprised how many requests for marriage they get. There are a lot of American women who are fascinated by serial killers.
But well, think about it this way: would you find a woman that's a serial killer fascinating?
I wouldn't.
What if she's hot?
No.
If she got big tits,
No, not really.
The Black Widow type of...
No, because I tend to like to be alive. I'm just saying. And
but what if you think you can change her?
Yeah, no. I've committed a lot of mistakes in my life, but let's just say that naivete is not one of them. I just not to be that naive. Sometimes I'm naive, but not to that level. I mean, I think that's.
I mean, you stopped talking with communists, so I guess there's that.
So I would definitely not find serial killers attractive, female serial killers attractive, or male for that matter. But the thing is that in the US, you have a lot of these kinds of groups that tend to be, abnormal in many ways. Most close to the we Europeans are pretty fucking mediocre. Both our smartest and our stupidest kind of emigrated somewhere else. No offense, Australia, our stupidest were mostly sent to Australia.
I said this and I got a lot of backlash for it, and I'll put it on your channel now. It's like when Australia sends immigrants to New Zealand, they're not sending their best.
Yeah, and let me guess, you made that joke a bit too soon after a particular event. There you go. That's why you got the backlash.
But no, I generally didn't understand. It's like people were picking on Trump, and it's like, I'm sorry, but Trump is for firm border control. Like if you looked at this guy's record, you might have noticed some red flags.
Yeah, there might have been some gigantic flag poles over there. Yeah, that's true. Now, I mean, bants about Australia is pretty common, and I've yet to meet legit Australians being offended by these kinds of jokes. I mean, my friend Lloyd the Younger was like, I'm not sure whether you still need a criminal record to get to Australia. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, that's why, so you have this, fan base, and a culture that glorifies serial killers in a way.
They're trying to hide their names now, and...
but they're only doing that with mass shooters, but with serial killers they don't, and they probably will not anytime
Bank robbers as well, very famous.
The bank robbers era kind of ended after the 50s. But the serial killer era kind of still continues.
Yeah, I guess it's fascinating in a way, because I looked at many Wikipedia articles on them. It's like, how does a person like this think? Why do they do what they do? So it is interesting in a way.
Oh, of course.
How did they get caught? Also.
I'm not saying it's not interesting from an intellectual perspective. but I have to admit that I'm still having troubles in understanding how it is interesting to send fan mail.
Yeah, I don't get that either. Like I would like, to look at them like animals in a zoo, from far away.
Yeah, sure. After two separate layers of fences, that's safe enough.
What do you think of Hong Kong?
We'll get to Hong Kong immediately. Compare that to how China treats its serial killers, or India treats its serial killers.
Bullet in the head, right?
Yeah. Well, in India they hang them, but you get the point. So, I mean, most of the other cultures, and even ours, I mean, Marius Ciampa, I know he exists because, I've read about it and I've got...
but he's really not...
You had no idea he existed. Most people, if you go outside now in Yashed, ask 100 people, do you know who Marius Ciampa is?
Only Romaru, that's the only one.
Yeah, Romaru is the only one who's still known is because he had a lot of victims.
And it was during communism. Like during communism, to talk about a criminal, it was just...
Yeah, and during communism, there was this pretense that there is no crime rate in the country. Of course, it was nonsense.
It was insanely high.
It was
saw the records,
it was pretty high.
Higher than now.
Definitely higher than now, for sure.
And people would sleep with their doors open.
And no, not really.
My grandma was sleeping with her doors open.
Oh, well, maybe your grandma was not particularly concerned for her safety. No, the crime rate was pretty high. But the regime liked to pretend that...
and when the regime finally talks about the criminal, like, that is really shocking. And even now you have to think, like, just how much shit did he do in order for the communists to admit that he exists and to warn people to stay inside.
A similar case happened in the Soviet Union with Andrei Chikatilo. But I think it was the chessboard killer or something like that. The guy had the objective to kill 64 women. And
man with a plan.
Yeah. Well, that's why he was called the chessboard player, because the chessboard has 64 squares. He got caught after killing the 63rd. So if they had been delayed a little bit, he would have never been caught. And it was so horrific that eventually the hardline commies of the Soviet Union, they're like, let's call the FBI for assistance.
Oh my God!
And they did. Yes, and they sent an FBI profiler, and that's how they eventually narrowly caught him.
We got the FBI in Caracas as well.
I don't think they could be particularly helpful there, because there is nothing to profile.
Well, people say that it might be a child trafficking ring,
and the suspect is already in custody. At least in Russia, they actually needed the FBI, because the FBI had already developed, at least in the early stages, the science of profiling.
You know what's shocking? Like when Chernobyl happened, they wouldn't contact the US to get a robot in order to clean that, and they got the FBI involved. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. There's whole books about...
I guess like Chernobyl was such a big fuck up that it would be considered shameful for the nation, while everyone has serial killers in it.
Yeah, and the existence of a serial killer in a country of 200-something million that the Soviet Union had at the time is, it just sometimes happens. And even then they could still spin it propagandistically. Look, we had one, but we called the FBI because they had like dozens of them. So they're still the purely decadent ones. I mean, that was the intended narrative to be used. It was never used in the end, because Chikatilo was tried after the fall of the Soviet Union. But yes, I hope I'm getting the name right. Either the chessboard killer for sure, but I don't think it's...
Maybe you're naming some Russian scientist then.
Oh no! Andrei Chikatilo was for sure a serial killer in the Soviet Union.
Don't know if it's
whether it's this one, but the chessboard
again, the stolen valor, you don't get.
The chessboard killer, that's for sure. Yes. Hong Kong. That's kind of terrible, but kind of expected.
Yeah, it is expected.
Are you surprised?
No. It's part of the plan that Hong Kong is going to become China in the future, right? So a lot of people don't know it. The story is that after the Opium Wars, Britain got Hong Kong, and it wasn't forever. It was
on a lease.
Yeah, it was on a lease, and the time expired, and now Hong Kong, the Chinese will tell you that it does belong to China, but unofficially, it has its own flag, it's got its own freedom of the press.
It has its own currency, they issue their own passports. I know, because I met people from Hong Kong.
You can't travel to the mainland or vice versa without papers.
I need a passport.
It's not like Scotland or Ireland.
No, you need a passport.
You need a passport, and what I find, black humor sort of way funny, is that you look at the press from the West, and they see that the people from Hong Kong are sporting the British imperial flag, and the press is foaming at the mouth, because they're implying that Imperial Britain was better than communist China, you know?
Well, Imperial Britain was better than China, than communist China. I mean, is that under dispute?
Yeah, and they start
nowadays?
going like, oh, the wars, and look how many people Britain killed. It's like, yeah, I noticed that leftists don't differentiate when a government kills its own people versus when a government deals warfare. You know, like when you...
Well, to be fair, the leftists are being consistent. Aren't they against discrimination? What does differentiate means? Is to be able to tell the difference is to discriminate. You know, the left doesn't discriminate.
My kitty is here.
Ah, who cares?
Hopefully it's not going to... Can you open the door for it so it... Yeah, I just don't want it to attack your equipment or something. Okay.
Nah.
So...
you have to put your kitten in the frame. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, they don't differentiate, but if they want me, for example, right, to rise up in a socialist revolution, why would I risk my life in the revolution so that the government that I instate then gets to persecute me and my family? You know, like, doesn't make any sense, you know? And if you ask like most people, they probably don't want warfare. You know, it's like the American people usually don't vote for the wars that America has. So when they say capitalism kills millions, yeah, I guess, but it's not that the people from America, you know, consent. You ask an American how many wars America has, probably doesn't even know to name the countries that they are.
Yeah, sure, but let's not forget that most Americans shouldn't be expressing opinions on that either. That's why the country is a republic and not a democracy. And again, it's very hard to explain this to people, but if you are to exist as an empire, you have to defend your interests. Because if you don't, someone else will.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think America is an empire. I keep hearing this. Like, they're not invading Canada, for example.
Sure.
Like,
it's not an empire in
world hegemon, I think.
In the traditional sense. But it is an empire in the classical sense. And I think that's a good thing, by the way. Namely that, you know, what is an empire? Well, it has a capital, in this case, the continent of North America, in essence. And then it controls portions of the geopolitics of its allies, which are part of the empire in a way.
Well, that's a great power, not necessarily.
Yeah, and then controls the most important trade routes. That's a feature of any empire. Any empire that doesn't have trade routes secured, it is not a good empire.
I mean, I like to call it the world hegemon, and I argue with leftists. It's like, look, if there will always be a world hegemon, right? Like throughout human history, someone is going to be the world hegemon. You can't have it any other way, right? So if it wouldn't be America, who would you like? Would you like China? Would you like Russia? Or would you like Saudi Arabia? You know, like you look at the major contenders, because it's not going to be Romania that's going to be the world hegemon.
It's not going to be Saudi Arabia either. More likely Qatar, because they have more money and they can buy more influence. I mean, especially leftists like to go a lot about, you know, the leftists who pretend not to be leftists, that would be the alt-right. They like to go about Israel influence, which is actually minuscule. And then the leftists who are honest about their leftism like to go about Saudi Arabia. They both seem to forget Qatar.
Yeah, AJ Plus, Al Jazeera Plus, and how many millions of dollars they donate into U.S. Academia.
Yeah, I mean, they spend about $500 million just on university activism alone, and just in the US, not to mention what they spend in Canada, what they spend in France, what they spend in Germany, what they spend in the United Kingdom.
And it's so bewildering, right? Like they're a nation that still has modern day slavery. Like
of course.
If you were to treat someone in my country like the Qatarian treats their workers, you would be arrested. You'd be convicted for slavery. So
there was a case like that with some sort of, but it was much better than the Qataris.
Much better,
here in Romania, it was in Argeș County about 2 years ago. It was very similar with the one in the UK because they appeared like a week before. It was this case in Wales, and then 1 week later,
it was much better than in Qatar.
Yeah, and 1 week later was this one in Argeș County in Romania. In both of them, the slaves, the victims of those families, were treated much better than the Qatari workers, and they all went to jail, of course.
So you have like the Qatar, this horrible country, right, where I think like a couple of people died building the new soccer football.
A couple of people that we know of. Who knows how many died?
But anyway, right? So they're lecturing the West on social justice, on slavery, on all these issues that you should do. Like you look at AJ Plus, is the most regressive propaganda that's mainstream. Even the Young Turks pale in comparison.
Yes, in a way. But then again, the Young Turks don't benefit from that much funding.
Oh, they only got 20 million from Qatar.
But I mean, generally,
Did you notice that? Like the Young Turks, when I used to watch them, they were pretty funny, but like they had the segments on can you guess whose Kuchi is it, whose camel toe is that? They would look, and they were not taking themselves too seriously. They're very relaxed, and then they get $20 million from Qatar, and from that.
Yes, absolutely. But then again, the whole budget of the Young Turks operation pales in comparison to the budget that Al Jazeera Plus has. So of course Al Jazeera is going to be much more regressive and much more well made. I mean, some of their propaganda, I'm looking at it, taking notes. I'm like, oh, this is really well made. Because I consume propaganda as well, just so I can learn from other people. Sometimes I find
which is the one you like the most.
Depends on the topic. So
let's say fuck white people.
From the fuck white people. At one point, Vox used to make the best propaganda clips on fuck white people. Today, they've gotten really terrible at it. At one point, Huffington Post was really good at it, but now they went terrible too. I don't think there is anyone who's doing good fuck white people propaganda.
Yeah, even the Young Turks are failing.
Oh, yeah, no, they've always failed. At this particular, anti-white racism, they've always failed. They're always pretty terrible. And that's because nobody can seriously perceive Anna Kasparian as a person of color. Because, she's like literally Caucasian. It's very hard to argue from that. But that's one of the reasons.
The Root has fuck white people propaganda.
The Root, yes, but the Root doesn't have video propaganda, and they're writing. Some of it is pretty good, actually. I mean, I've seen some of it in this. But
let's go move on. Fuck the police.
Fuck the police. Fuck the police. The Antifas used to make very good propaganda. Daily Cost still has good propaganda on fuck the police.
What else is there? Fuck the US.
Fuck the US. Well, that's a little bit. That's quite a competition over there.
It is a competition.
Yeah, because Россия сегодня or Russia Today has pretty good propaganda on that. It's in the sense that it's very insidious. Oftentimes, if you don't know the nuances of Russian geopolitics, you don't even realize that you're being subjected to propaganda. So that's what I count as very good propaganda. Propaganda that you need to be a fellow propagandist to identify it. Okay, that's bait.
Yeah, but at least Russia Today is in the name, like AJ Plus, you don't know it's from Qatar.
Sure. But you don't realize that Russia Today has gotten pretty smart at it. I mean, some of their videos that are very provocative are not published under Russia Today. They're published under Raptly. Which is a special separate agency that is not even headquartered in Russia, and it's bailed as a separate news agency that has nothing to do with Russia or Russia Today, and they just happen that sometimes their clips are also broadcasted on Russia Today, but that's just a one-off thing.
What else do the Democrats do? So fuck white people, fuck the police, fuck the US.
Open borders.
Well, that's fuck the US, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Although in Europe, some of those NGOs, they produce pretty decent propaganda.
Fuck Trump.
Well, with the fuck Trump, I don't think there is any good fuck Trump propaganda.
Do you know why there isn't any more good fuck Trump propaganda?
I suspect that they have reached the maximum amount of audience that they can convert.
If I tell you, you're going to fall under this table laughing.
Oh.
Remember when the Wall Street Journal made their PewDiePie thing, and they said that PewDiePie said the N-word and Coca-Cola sponsors this? Well, it turns out a lot of brands have created a new thing on the market, which is called brand safety firms. And the brand safety firms, in their infinite wisdom, decided that anything to do with Trump is not brand safety.
So it gets automatically demonetized.
Yeah, because someone is going to get offended, right? Like if you have a very good editorial for Trump, you're going to get the left-wing activists. If you have a fuck Trump article, you're going to get like the conservatives that are going to boycott. So let's not have anything on the Trump. So you might put out a fuck Trump article that gets viral, it's got millions of views.
But it's not getting monetized.
You're not going to get many money for it. And this is not on YouTube. This is on everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Nevertheless, Washington Post doesn't need advertisers' shekels because there's Bezos will always subsidize.
Yeah, I mean there still is something, but it's not
same with the New York Times. They don't really.
If you don't get the news cycle going, it's not the same.
That's true. Although again, MSNBC, or as I like to call MSLSD, that place has its bread and they still have Rachel Maddow on, don't they?
My God!
The biggest conspiracist ever to air.
No, she was CNN, wasn't she?
No, she's on MSLSD. She was at MSLSD 2 months ago. I haven't watched MSLSD since then, but I promise I will. I'll catch up with the propaganda.
Russians.
Yeah. And even their propaganda, their fucked up Trump propaganda, has become really low quality.
Well, after it was exposed that there was nothing like... What I really loved is that the guy that doing the Trump is like, we couldn't prove that Trump is innocent. And, you know, like, I'm not the most smartest guy in the bunch, but it's like, is your judge to prove... Is it your job to prove that he's innocent? Like, I thought you have innocent until proven guilty as a principle.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you know this already. This is now no longer the case with the left, you know.
Yeah, how many principles are they? So, okay, fuck freedom of association, fuck freedom of speech, fuck innocent until proven guilty.
Or any semblance of a civilized justice system, to be...
Yeah.
You know.
Fuck your kids.
Sometimes literally. Sometimes literally. Yeah, of course. The left is a force of civilizational destruction, of course. This has always been the case since there has been a left. So,
is there like no leftist government or policies that you could say, you know, that they weren't that bad? Or
no, not really. Not really, because any policy, no matter how nice it would look like for a while, if left unhelicoptered for too long, eventually ends in tragedy. I mean, people tend to forget that, you know, even to this day, even though it's been 30 years since it hasn't been true anymore, you still get among the Western left, oh, but my Sweden. Sweden is not a socialist state.
And it's not even a good example to give anymore.
So from an economics perspective, Sweden kind of abandoned most of its socialism when it collapsed as a country in 1992. And the few people that were still around to believe in the old myth eventually got, you know, fled. People forget that IKEA is not a Swedish company anymore.
That's why they're getting immigrants, because people don't vote for the left there.
Yeah, and not only they don't vote, I mean, the smartest Swedes are emigrating. So, you know, it's a very dysgenic thing. That
in Europe, I understood that, okay, you got a Christian conservative government and you got a progressive government, and they take turns, you know, and the progressives, they have some policies that they put on, and then the conservatives come in power and they get rid of the bad ones and they keep something that, you know, most people like. Not a perfect system, but it used to be. Now you got the left bringing in millions of immigrants. Now the immigrants don't necessarily vote, but now you have hate speech laws. You know, you need to be very careful, you know, in their presence and blah blah blah. And you don't want to be labeled a racist because you get fired.
Yeah, thankfully, at least myself, I don't really care. I mean, what are they? It's exactly what I told you in the other video. What are they going to do? Write mean words about me? Oh my God, can you imagine the horror? Oh, someone is going to say something bad about me on the internet.
Okay, if you were popular, let's say you were like Milo, you get Milo Yiannopoulos.
I just
PayPal bans you, Facebook bans you, YouTube bans you.
You'll be surprised how fine Milo is. I just met Milo again in May, and I got a chance to chat. I mean, the guy is fine. Trust me. You know. And even he was...
Yeah, but he comes from a wealthy family. You can't say the same. Like, if it was done to you, right? Like, let's say...
Yeah, he comes from a wealthy family, but you keep on forgetting he's not in good terms with his family. And he's still fine.
But I'm saying, like, if you are banned from all internet mainstream platforms and PayPal ban, credit card ban, you know, like all of these things, would you still be able to go do your business?
Of course. I worked most of my life without having a bank account. Are you kidding me? Of course. And even today, I rarely do electronic transactions. No, this is, you know, maybe people should learn to rely on technology even a little bit less. This is a beef of my own, and this is where you see my deeply reactionary conservative side, where I technology. Yeah, technology man bad, you know. But no, seriously, technology man bad. I mean, some aspects of technology should be kept in check, not by governments, but by individuals. I don't allow the technology to own you.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to live in a first world country and you don't really have the background, you need technology. Like, if you have a business, you need Facebook to advertise it. You know, if you have employment, your employer is going to look at your Facebook. Because you can lie in your resume, but you can't lie in 4 years of social media activity.
Yeah, but if you do, there's no obligation to have a social media account.
They don't hire you then.
You'd be surprised how often this is not happening.
I mean, if you're a guy that's renowned in the industry for being really good at what you're doing, yeah, you're going to be hired, or if you have the connections. But if you're just, you know, a university student that just finished, they're going to look at your social media activity, and if they don't find anything, they throw your resume on the trash can and they go to the next one.
It's nowhere near like that. No, this is mostly mythology, just like many other mythologies that the HR people like to spread to scare off some of the competition. Look, Within the last 10 years, I've been part of the decision to hire people in multiple
How many gender
companies.
studies did you hire?
Oh, no, zero, of course. So no, I do discriminate, but based on these kinds of things, you know, oh, you have socialist crap in your CV. Down the shredder it goes. I don't care. I mean, even if it's just a summer camp. Oh, you attended a Girls Up campaign? That's so cute. Down the shredder it goes. So I do discriminate based on that. But I've never even heard someone seriously doing, oh, they don't have a Facebook, therefore that's haram. No. No, really
it was a case in the United Kingdom. They got sued. This kid was straight A student, and he was following Alex Jones on Twitter. So they decided that, nope, you're not going to get in. So he sued. They managed to get in.
I presume he won. Yeah, because I'm not saying this doesn't happen. I'm saying it's a lot rarer than people think. I mean, the only reason that case made the news is precisely because it's rare.
Oh, I can give you 3 or 4 other examples where they looked at the social media and they found how many people got fired because of something posted.
Yeah, with firing is very common. That's true. But not hiring in the first place, it's not that common as people think.
Well,
yes, being fired for something you post on social media, that's pretty common.
After you get fired, do you think it's not difficult to get a new job because they know why you got fired?
Depends on the job, depends on the industry, depends on a lot of things. And besides, it's coming back to the era of not having a college degree. Even, you know, like Ernst & Young, who do money laundering for rich people. They announced like 5 years ago, you know what, fuck your degree. No, we're going to take people that have no degree, because as it turned out, when we filter for degree, we get a disproportionate amount of people with prejudiced views on economics and taxation.
Prejudiced views.
So as a result, we're going to expand our pool of talent seeking, and we'll get people without degrees who may have a healthier view about economics.
Speaking of Democrats, and this is a video that I made which just baffles my brain. They're running on the campaign of abolishing student debt. And I'm thinking, like, imagine if you're a guy who is in the United States and you're like, you know, I can't afford going to university. I just can't. You know, it's too expensive. I'll never be able to pay the loan. And some other guy goes and he gets like, well, why do you go to university? To make the connections, right? Like you get to meet the people that know the people and you can get it. So he gets something out of it. Now he can't pay the debt. And the government is going to tell you, who didn't go to university,
they need to subsidize.
You need to pay his taxes.
Yeah, well, you're subsidizing it anyway. I mean, one of the ways I like to piss off people is to remind them that any government help for university student, even a penny, is money being redistributed from the very poor to the middle class.
Yes.
And I don't know how you can argue that that's something fair. It's not. It's fundamentally unfair.
Pay my diploma, bigot.
Yes, and that's unfair.
Well, at least in America you pay it back, right? So it's not like...
Yeah, you do pay it back, but that's the thing. I mean, it's still a subsidized loan, because through inflation, you pay with a much lower interest than the inflation rate. So, you know, most people still do get a subsidized, even those who paid only those who pay out of pocket in cash up front. Those are the only ones that get zero subsidy.
The problem with U.S. universities, like, first of all, okay, you want to do that, fine. But if you get your loan paid off by the government, give your diploma back.
Or at the very least, I don't know, do some public service for a year or two.
No, give the diploma back. I think that's a lot better. You know, if you ever mention in a resume you have a diploma, that's a criminal offense.
Yeah, well, that would deter quite a lot for them to apply for forgiveness.
Like buy back. You know, you buy a vacuum cleaner you don't like, you send it back. The thing with the U.S. universities, and this boggles my brain, right? Like, at least in Romania, we have them public. And the government can set the price for the university, and at the same time, if they push some garbage, like there was in the psychology university in my town, they actually had a cult, some pro-life bullshit, and the government shut it down, right? Because it's the government owns the university. In America, the government doesn't own the university, but
they do own some of them.
Yeah, but
because there is such thing as public colleges.
Yeah, but it's mostly private, and they.
No, it's not mostly private. That's where you're wrong.
Really?
Like, sure, the big ones are mostly private.
Yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, but most people don't go to those because there's not enough physical room to have them all admitted. No. Yeah. There's a lot of public colleges and state colleges. Yeah, the federal government doesn't own universities, but the states, no, they kind of.
No, the issue is that then the universities get to set whatever price they want, because if you're going to just have people, you know, making loans and being able to take.
The involvement of the government in the whole. college
just
scam has driven up the prices.
Think of a law school. Like, how much money do you need for a retroprojector, the electricity, and the auditorium?
Yeah, but as you said, you're paying for the connections that you're making there, not for the knowledge itself. I mean, Ben Shapiro talks in his shows about how it was at Harvard Law School. And, you know, I think it's Mrs. Kagan, one of the Supreme Court justices today, he was his teacher. And the inauguration talk after, you know, like first year, first class, it was with one of who is now a Supreme Court justice, and basically told them, okay, the competition is over for you. You're set for life. The fact that you're here in this class, in the inaugural talk of the Harvard Law School, that's it, that's over. I mean, you don't have to do anything really from now on. Because you know all the right people, you know.
But all universities are like that, right? And my point is, like, in the case of American universities, they're absurdly expensive compared to European universities.
Yeah, and the reason that they're absurdly expensive is because, first of all, it's because, again, the state has gotten involved. If it hadn't, then the universities would have been forced to set the price according to what the market can bear.
Exactly.
And the second aspect is that, you know, they do offer a lot more. I'm sorry, but in terms of connections, they do offer a lot more. Most European universities are absolute and utter trash. Which ones are not? Well, it's an Oxford, which is private.
I mean, it depends what you want to do. Like, if you want to become a doctor and you go to med school, I think it's
yeah, sure. But the best way is to do the med school in Romania and then go practice in Israel or the United States. You know, countries that actually pay their doctors well.
Yeah.
Because nobody in Europe pays at least the state system.
Yeah, I mean, this really pissed me off because when I was a kid, you know, my mom was like, oh...
Yeah, but you're for socialized healthcare, so shut the fuck up.
Oh, I'll talk about that. But my mom was like, oh, if you don't study, you're going to end up like that plumber. And now I'm thinking, you know,
the plumber is actually making more money than the doctor,
That plumber, like when I called the plumber to unclog my toilet because it had shit in it, he scheduled me 4 days in advance.
Yes.
So I'm like, holy shit!
Oh, you're lucky.
Yeah, and
oftentimes it takes 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then the guy comes and he charges me like $200 or something, you know, and he puts it in his pocket. He doesn't even, you know, like doesn't have to justify them.
No, because
didn't give me a receipt or anything.
He doesn't have to. He doesn't have to because under EI, individual enterprise rules, you know, he just declares an income, pays 3% of the turnover, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm thinking, you know, like
for him.
I got 2 university diplomas. You
know,
no
one cares.
No one cares, right? So it's the fact that the trade schools, and I think like the Social Democrats, they killed the trade schools, didn't they, in our country?
Yeah, and now they are the ones bringing them back. Because even they have finally realized what a colossal mistake it was. Though, to be fair, the trade schools were mostly, or at least the government-owned ones. The private ones stayed there, and they made very good money once the government shut down their own. It was in the union with the National Liberals, so, you know, the right had its own fault in this too. But yes, Ms. Ekaterina Antonescu, Bambuica, is the...
I actually defended her when she said that... parents should do more to teach kids not to go into cars with strangers.
Yeah, that's stupid. That's a stupid mistake, and that's a stupid statement to be made in a stupid moment.
Yeah,
don't do that kind of shit.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, everyone I talk about the Caracal case, they said the same thing. Like, why did she get in a car with a stranger?
Yeah, sure, but the people that you're talking are not the Minister of Education.
Yeah.
No,
my point is that you can have both conversations. Like, why is the 911 incompetent, and why?
Yeah, sure, but you can't do that when you're part of the government. And not when the emotions of the publics run high. So, you know,
that's true.
With the Caracal case, I got a bit lucky because it happened exactly as I was prepared to go to Poland.
So you didn't get involved.
So I didn't get to publish and talk anything about the case. And my first chat about it will be next week during the Romanian language podcast when I finally get back to my hometown. And by that time, most of the emotions had died down a little bit. I saw that the case is no longer topped in the headlines. So, you know, by that time we can have any conversation that you like. But you can't have that. I mean, that's a very insensitive thing to do.
The bodies haven't even got called yet.
Yeah, I know. And again, it was the problem that she was part of the government because, you know...
she was suggesting that in schools they would teach, more awareness to kids, and I think that's a good thing.
No, not really. No. It's a very elitist way of looking at things. I mean, you have to remember that in our country, there still is this disdainful bullshit that if you want to do public transport as a private entrepreneur, you still need like a bajillion licenses to do that.
Oh,
and in the case of specifically with the Caracal situation, that place was not covered by public transport.
Not claim because, it was.
Well, it wasn't. I talked to people who live there, and they're like, no, it wasn't. And the reason it was is because the county council decided to cancel the only operator that was authorized there because they claimed that that operator didn't have enough licenses.
Let me tell you something else. Like in my town, there was a private contractor that used to compete with the buses. And for once in my life, I noticed that the price for a bus ticket actually got cheaper rather than more expensive, right? Yes. So you had the mayor coming in on television, very angry about it, and he said that no, this is not okay because it's not really competition. It's not really competition because the person waiting for the bus stop doesn't get to choose what buses he goes into. He's just going to take the first one. And we're comparing apple with oranges. Like
you can choose to take the second one.
Yeah. Well, no, that was he said, right? And another example of something that worked and they fucked it up is we used to have these Eurobingo, ProTV, like these television shows.
Televised scams, yeah.
Yeah, where you purchase a ticket and if the numbers come up, they call you online, right? Wasn't really a scam because my mom won, but it was competing with the National Lottery.
Oh yeah, of course.
So what they did is they got the National Audiovisual Council to move the hour to a more unpopular time, and that's when they lost audience and ratings.
Yeah, again, the state fucking things up. That's not.
But it's not fucking things up. It's like the state. Maintaining its dominance and making sure there is no competition with itself.
Again, this is standard operating. It's the EU way. Because again, the same thing has happened in Germany, in Hungary, in Spain. This is not a local disease. It's a European disease. That's why I keep on saying that the continent is disordered.
Yeah, I'm looking at the French and it boggles my mind. They keep voting left, and then it's like, oh, we pay too much taxes and they riot. Why are you voting left then?
Well, because it's the country of the French Revolution. Revolutionary mentality it's part and parcel of being French.
I mean, look at it, right? They complain about the government wanting to take away some of the benefits that the railroad contractors have, right? And they have like such a sweet deal. Like if you work for the French railway, you get to, I believe, go to retirement at 50 years. They can't fire you, right? And the government said, all right, we're not going to take away the existing people, but anyone that comes in
will not get
the same deals. Yeah, and they rioted.
Of course.
And it's like, well,
it's the same rhetoric that they use here. It's an earned right. Drept câștigat. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's the same with Macron. It's like, they voted for,
To be fair, on economics, Macron has been further to the right than the French mainstream. But what people don't realize that French mainstream is very like here.
Yeah, but Macron was like, we're going to fight for the environment and stuff. So when he adds taxes on gas, well, I guess it kind of worked because no one was driving cars in Paris for a while. And he managed to do something that no other president did. He managed to unite the people. Like I saw people.
Too bad it was against him, but
yeah, it was people from the far right. Like they had, the Atomwaffen masks and stuff, marching next to people with a hammer and sickle.
Yeah,
and they were all wearing yellow vests. And I was looking at it, and it's like, holy shit.
Yeah, well, at some point, even left-wing voters realized that taxation is theft. And from a certain point on, it's just too much theft.
Oh, but the left-wing voter doesn't understand, and this is something
Basic
that needs
economics.
to be done. Yeah, you can call them that. Like when you get free shit, it's not free.
Yeah,
and you're basically paying for it by getting taxed.
Yeah.
And the leftists is usually like either tax the rich, like don't tax me, you're going to tax the rich, and the rich is anyone that's more wealthy than you. Or they're going to be like, they just don't understand.
No. Yeah, it's the same thing you see in the US. That's why I'm asking you about the Democrats, because their economic narrative has gotten even more insane. Because we should tax the top 1%. People don't realize that the top 1% of the US is something like $350,000 before taxes a year. There are a lot of, in fact, most of the upper middle class is actually in the top 1%. And that's because the poorest of the poor in the US are still in the global top 1%.
Yeah, but not only that, it's like if you tax those 1%, they're just going to fuck off. Like, why will they stay in? They just do a risk assessment, and it'll be, is it more costly for us to leave or to stay?
As I was telling you, IKEA is no longer a Swedish company. Guess what was the reason?
Yeah, and not only that, but they're also against tariffs, right? Because a lot of companies will go like, oh, no, let's go to Mexico. We get cheap labor there. We got, a lot of things. We grease the wheels with some bribery. And Trump is like, fuck you, tariffs. And they go to Mexico, they get, or to China, and they get their cheap iPhones there. But when they have to sell them to the American market, tariff.
Yeah.
The Democrats don't want tariffs.
Yeah.
So they're like,
yeah, and I mean, tariffs as a means of getting other countries to lower theirs are okay. I'm not a big fan of tariffs, like at all. But the way to, and this was one of my only objections to Trump when he mentioned tariffs in the campaign. I was like, I don't know about that. We'll see. So far, however,
it worked. Yeah.
No, not that. It worked, but he has actually used them as a bargaining chip rather than as something permanent. And yes, as a political agitation tool to force.
It's really effective. Yeah.
It's effective, but keeping tariffs long term tends to be very destructive.
I mean, it depends.
To give you an example, our great European Union, where the food is consistently getting more expensive when it shouldn't be. And one of the reasons is because, sometimes our summers are shit. Sometimes they're great, but sometimes they're shit. Now, when they're shit, there is the option to buy, from Africa, where food is produced plentiful and cheaply, at least in the capitalist countries of Africa. But we can't import them unless paying a huge tariff to Brussels. And so on one hand, we subsidize farmers who produce shit because the weather is shit. So it is what it is. And then we cannot import from places where they don't produce shit, where they produce nice stuff and cheap stuff, and we get to pay the tariffs for that. So we get to lose twice, you and I as consumers, and the only people who win are the politicians in Brussels.
And I also noticed that the reason food is expensive is that, first of all, our farmers have to go through many regulations in order to manage to stay afloat. And there's a couple of individuals that go to Italy, they go to a farm and they purchase, let's say, tomatoes from there, and they say they purchase them for 1 cent or something. And when they get here, they don't pay the VAT tax. So they go to the farmer's market, and the farmer can't be in business anymore because he has to sell them with the VAT tax and with
the farmer doesn't have to pay VAT tax either, by the way.
I think it is. I think it's like 5% or something.
No. In the farmer's market they don't. And again, either it's being sold in the supermarket, which again, not the farmer pays the VAT tax. It just gets rolled over to the supermarket because the bureaucracy is too complicated, and it's no point in putting the farmer to do the bureaucracy.
But the supermarket is bribing people. Is blackmailing people. You want to sell your product, you pay us more.
No.
Did you hear about that?
Nah.
You want your product top shelf?
Oh yeah, sure. The shelf tax is a real thing. But then again, I had the same conversation with the farmer in the US, and he was telling me, look, I don't give a shit about the inspection from the Food and Safety Administration. Fuck those people. I can pass their inspection without blinking. I'm afraid of the inspection from the supermarket because the supermarket has standards and you can't negotiate the standards. I mean, either your merchandise is good enough for their supermarket or it isn't. There is no way to negotiate around it. It either is or it isn't. So, I prefer the market regulation more than the state regulation for the simple reason that the market regulation tends to be a little bit more in favor of the consumer, and definitely not in favor of bureaucracy just so you can have bureaucracy. Because neither the farmer nor the supermarket has any benefit.
I disagree. I think bureaucracy is the mind of the person that wants to predict things. Like, the mind of the German can't compute, the idea that you don't know what's going to happen in 3 or 4 years. And bureaucracy is one way that they try to use in order to figure out, where things are going to be. So that's why. And another reason why we have bureaucracy is, and I learned this at law school, a lot of Romanians try to scam the system. So when you try to scam the system,
but when you add more bureaucracy, it just makes it easier to scam the system. Because again, once the law gets pretty complicated, it has to have imperfections.
I guess.
But the simpler a law is, the harder it is to work around it. The more complicated it is, and the more regulations there is, especially.
It's a double-edged sword, because when the Romanian IRS comes to your country, to your house, unless you're a very well-savvy economist, they can use that legislation, which is one book big and it always changes, to find some irregularities and give you a fine. So, you know, like they use this, all right, people steal from the government, we steal from the people.
That happens to you because you're insane enough to actually declare your income to the IRS. I don't. I prefer my Serbian friends who are much friendlier to my shekels than the ANAF, Fura, Mamilo, the Hots would ever be. So yeah, no, there's that.
Yeah, I think the mentality is like, okay, you steal from the government steals from you. You know, they can't catch the thieves, they can't catch the people that get the loopholes, so they just steal from the average citizen.
Yeah, and the solution to that is just stop the theft by the government from the people. Because that's the only immoral part. There is no such thing as stealing from the government. Me keeping more of my shekels is not stealing.
See, you say taxation is theft,
of course,
but
taxation.
I think not paying your taxes is theft.
No. Taxation is theft, for sure. There is no way to work around it. Now, we can argue that you cannot have a universal, you know, just like you have, for instance, you know, the first, you said you went to law school, so you understand how Roman law works. First, you enunciate...
Use gentium and use bellum.
Yeah, no, so first you enunciate the principle. So, you know, killing is terrible. And then, by exception, because self-defense, yada, yada, yada. The same thing I think it should be applied to taxes. You know, Article 1, taxation is theft. Article 2, by exception, we allow taxation maybe for military, maybe for diplomacy, maybe internal affairs, police, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with taxation is that I don't consider it theft because you get something in return, right? Like when someone comes into your house and steals shit, you don't get something in return from it. But if the government, for example, has a duty to give you something and it doesn't, you can sue the government. And there are cases where people won against the city hall. But from that and to say 72% tax rate, you know, like I think you did a video where you actually went and how much Romanians pay in taxes. Like
it's a lot of 60 something.
Yeah, like a lot of people don't add the VAT tax. A lot of people don't add the
excise taxes.
Yeah, like the tax for gas and everything has gas.
That's
you know?
excise tax.
Yeah, inflation, which is also a tax. Yeah, like just because the government prints more money and the fact that it devalues my money, that's still a tax.
It's you, the sucker, who loses.
You know, like the other taxes for like sugar tax, car taxes, and all. When you add them all up, like you're paying around 60 to 70%. It's fucking insane. I mean, even like the peasants that were working the field, they were paying like what, 1/10 of their crops to the Lord.
I was making this joke about 10 years ago. Where like we fought the Ottomans against their 10% tax.
Yeah, they had like a reasonable tax.
You know, when we were part of the Dar al-Akhd, which is the house of the treaty, technically under the Ottoman Empire, but they wouldn't force Islam on us. We would, the average person would pay about 13 to 14% taxes, 3 or 4% to the crown.
I think the blood tax was the one that pissed people off.
3 or 4% to the crown and 10% to Istanbul.
And then like, I think it was like 5% more to the church or something.
Yeah, but that wasn't mandatory, depending on the area, county, it was a little bit.
Let's assume it was. So
at worst it was about 20%. That was still about less than a third than what the average person pays today. And we call this advanced civilization.
I mean, you can argue that now, you know, you get sick and you get in a car crash, you know, the hospital will take care of you. You know, someone breaks into your house, allegedly, you can call the cops.
We've seen how that's been working. I'm just saying.
But, you know, like, yeah, okay, so you get a couple of more commodities, but what if I don't want the commodities? You know, what if I want to opt out? You know, like, I want to live strong and not worry about, you know, when I get sick. When I get sick, I want to die, you know?
Yeah, well, there's that, and there's also the fact that, and this is what most people refuse to even engage with, that. Well, some of them are paid shills, so of course they will refuse, but, you know, some reasonable people also refuse to engage. There isn't just two options here. There's degrees between them. You know, for instance, fine, if you think that the whole just leave me alone with the whole healthcare bullshit, if you think that's too radical, okay, let's discuss the Singapore system, which for some reason costs most people, you know, the public version only has emergencies and it's like 0.5% in taxes, and the rest of it you get to opt however you want. So nobody dies in the street, but at the same time nobody gets ripped off the way they are.
I was telling people this. It's like, look, what about the system where you can opt out and then you can't opt in? It's like, oh, it wouldn't work. Like, why wouldn't it work? Because you get people off the beds. Like, they're not going to be in a public hospital, so they're not going to take the resources, right? most people probably won't even opt out. It's like I generally don't know when this is going to end, because the taxes always go up, they never go down. People say Romania is a poor country. There was recently this scandal.
Maybe if you tax us a little bit less.
Yeah, like this guy was showing that to give 8,200 RON, which is like almost $2,000 for an employer, he has to pay taxes, and the employer gets $1,000 at the end of the month in his hand after all the taxes. How many people wouldn't like to actually earn $2,000?
Yeah.
And it's like employers would pay people more, but they can't.
Yeah, because to give you 8,200 net, after taxes, I as an employer would have to pay 16,000, 15,500, something to that effect. Yeah.
And on top of that, I gave you the article where an economist looked at the multinationals, like the supermarkets, and all of them like pay 1 or 2% of their how do you translate cifre de afaceri in
turnover?
Yeah, the turnover, like 1 or 2% of the turn, like.
No, I think that's fair. I think everyone should be paying 1 or 2%.
But they're not. And I'll tell you something, right? If the Romanian IRS goes to them in order to look at like
why, audit,
why are you paying so? Well, they're going to be met by the big four, the most expensive law firms, and now it goes like, okay, that's a little bit too costly for us. Yep. Let's fuck V instead.
Yeah. And again, they're able to fuck you because you're insane enough to actually go to the IRS and declare your income. You could have chosen not to.
I will get a pension, I guess, when I'm old.
Oh yeah. Come on, you can't be that naive. You will, by the time you get to the pension age, the public pension system would have collapsed at least twice.
That's another thing, before pension.
People think that cannot possibly happen. It has already happened in the last 10 years twice in Europe, once in Greece and once in Portugal. In Portugal, even today, they get like a third of the promised pension, and the rest of it is paid in government bonds that are redeemable like 30 years from now. So, the pensioners will long be dead by the time.
It's not even that, but if you look at the system before the pension, like if you tell someone, let's get rid of the pension system, they freak out. But before pension, you had kids. You want to have a good life when you're old. You get pension. 4 or 5 kids. Yes. That's your pension. Yep. And they get their pension by having more kids, and that actually incentivizes people to have children. I'm looking at Romania.
It also incentivizes them to be well behaved to those children.
Yeah.
Because if you suck as a parent too much, the children say, you know what, pops, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
Fuck off.
And if you look at Romania, last census, we had around 19 million people.
19.6.
19.6. Yeah, I read statistics saying that around 4 million have left.
I don't think that's true. It's a bit exaggerated. I mean, if that had been the case, it would have to be. You'd have to have a city like the size of Suceava to be completely empty. And
they didn't go from only one place. They went from everywhere.
Sure. But you would still have to notice distinct decreases in larger places.
There are rural areas completely desolated. If you go to Călăraș, you're going to find,
but most of the people from Călăraș live in Bucharest. They don't live abroad.
Well, my cousin, for example, from Călăraș to Bucharest, and from Bucharest to Spain.
But dying villages are a thing all over Europe. And not just Europe. I mean, in the US, I've seen a lot of abandoned villages as well. And it's not that their population is decreasing. It's not.
Yeah.
But people are moving for whatever reason. Well, we know the reasons. They move to large cities, and I can't blame them.
But think about it. Right? If I finish med school, I can either work in my country for $300 or pay a plane ticket and go to Germany.
First
and
of all,
there.
it's not. They've gotten.
Did they increase it?
Oh yeah. It's probably about $1,000 now.
Oh my God! I should reconsider.
Yeah, it's about. But the thing is that it has been increased, but of course it's not sustainable. The Social Democrats.
And are going to get taxed.
Well, either that or they'll have to freeze them for like a long period of time until I don't know
It's not the money that's the problem, right? Because I would have lived with $300 no problem. I would have lived in my one-room apartment, and I liked doing what I was doing. The problem is that so many other doctors left that you're being worked like a pig.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And you have to do the job of 3 to 4 other doctors in the amount of time that you are only allowed to do your job. And when you're placed on call, 32 hours. And that, like, if you fuck up,
it's your fault.
It's your fault, yeah. If the professor fucks up, it's still your fault.
Yes, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
It is like a system that, like that's what pissed me off the most, is the fact that you're not paid for those 32 hours. You're still paid for 8 hours.
Yes.
So they are scamming you. So,
The rest of it is for the fatherland, comrade.
yeah, for the fatherland. Absolutely. So I can understand why people leave. You know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that now with these kinds of socialist schemes, like almost all countries of Europe have a shortage of doctors. You know, the NHS is still on shortage. The Swedish system is still on
Oh,
shortage.
yeah, but the NHS got how many people who don't pay into the system? You know, like they open the borders.
Oh yeah, sure.
So if you get like, if I have a barbecue party with you and you invite all your friends who didn't pay in for the barbecue, well, there's not going to be meat around for
There's
everyone.
not enough barbecue for everyone. Yeah, sure. But and again, if I bring just another friend who didn't pay, yeah, okay, maybe we can figure it out. But if I bring 100 friends,
Yeah, and you know, like they say, this is what I don't get. Like they say in America, immigrants pay taxes. How?
Well,
like illegals. We're not talking about the legal ones.
yeah, no. Well, actually, in America, they kind of do have a point because on some, for instance, if they set up a business, you can set up a business even if you're illegal.
So if I go to America, right? And I just take a plane there, and then I don't want to leave. I do my YouTube.
You forget to leave. Well, if you do your YouTube, eventually ICE will gonna find you. And
You know, like I spoke with this guy, Jewish guy, very conservative. And he told me he had a friend who also overstayed his visa, and the guy was like, "Look, you need to do something about it, right? Because I don't want to be associated with you unless you get it all legal and up and up." So eventually, like the guy goes and reports himself to ICE, and they didn't want to deport him. They said, "It's like." What we're going to do is when you go back to your country, you're not going to be allowed to come back. But as long as you stay here and you don't commit any crimes, no one is going to come after you.
Yeah, well, there are ways to work around that, and that's the thing, because I've met a lot of people who immigrated in various ways to the US, and basically if that happens, you just go and pay a few $1,000 to a very smart lawyer. I can recommend a few.
You grease some wheels.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly legal, but you just need a very competent lawyer, and there are quite a few competent immigration lawyers. And essentially what you do is then you go and set up a meeting, not with ICE, but with the Citizenship Authority. And you state your intentions, and you say, for instance, look, the intention is to eventually become a citizen, or at the very least stay here a lot longer. And look, my visa expired just a month ago. You have to go pretty. I mean, you don't.
You say you're Muslim.
Well, actually, that's actually detrimental to
Is
the
it?
case. Well, I guess except New York, where I guess it's a plus. But in most of the country, it's not particularly good to be a Muslim. Especially if you go there, as I'm a Muslim, you have to let me in here. That's probably when they'll say no, that's not gonna happen. But if you just passingly, if you're an Albanian Muslim, they probably don't give a shit. But if you're a Somali Muslim, I don't know. It's all statistics. So yeah, you just state your intentions, and usually there are ways to. The state basically comes up with the individual kind of deals. And some of them might involve, you have to travel back to your country, or just forget that you overstayed your visa, because the US doesn't have a customs office at the exit. So when we drove from the US to Canada, nobody asks for your passport when you get out of the US.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's true in the airports as well. Nobody asks your passport when you leave the United States.
That's fascinating.
Only when you get in.
Well, I guess, like it's the best country in the world.
Yeah, they don't give a shit who leaves. So yeah, it's the same.
Well, unless you have a criminal record, right? Like if you don't pay your taxes and you flee the country, wouldn't they know?
Well, not really, no. If you drive through it, they can't know, really. If you drive through the border and then you fly from Mexico or whatever. If you fly from an airport, of course, they know because you book your plane and the system knows
but
it.
If you go by car,
yeah.
that's why there needs to be a wall.
That's why what?
There needs to be a wall.
Yeah, well,
Then you can't drive the car through the wall.
well, actually, you still can, because the wall still has gates, and the exit will still be free. So, it's only the entrance.
There might be cameras, I guess.
Yeah, but you can drive yourself through and once you get on the Mexican side, the Mexicans don't give a
Do you
shit.
think the wall will be built?
The wall is being built slowly.
I understand they're just rebuilding parts of the wall that's already there.
Yes, and also putting in some more fences where there wasn't fences. And yes, some of the fences are not particularly spectacular, as some of the die-hard Trump supporters had hoped. But then again, people don't realize it's a huge border.
Yeah, no, it would be a world wonder.
Yeah, and only about several months ago has Trump finally finished with all of the legal hurdles thrown at him by the Democrats.
Do you know, there's a legal hurdle because, if you want to build a wall in certain places, you need to look at the wildlife preservation and how you're affecting the species of bunny.
Welcome to environmentalism, comrade. I mean, yeah, it is what it is. And I understand why the Trump supporters are not, some of them, most of them aren't, but some of them are a little bit disappointed. Oh, come on, we were promised a wall. But then again, practical politics is not like...
People raised how much, $100 million or something?
Yeah, that's not really enough.
It's not really enough, but it goes to show that people really want it.
Yeah, but the thing is that the government is not allowed to take that money.
I know, but it was symbolic.
Sure.
It creates it sparks the conversation.
Oh yeah, for sure. $100 million can spark any conversation.
Yeah,
really.
I mean that's the thing. It's not enough, obviously, but to have people willing to put out that much.
Oh, sure. But then again, I mean, people don't seem to realize that the practical politics of matters is a little bit more complicated than that. That's why we have a Mike Pence. That's why we have other, Mitch McConnell. People who are not particularly likable or popular.
But they know
But they are the ones who get things done. For a smiley face, you get Mr. Trump. But for the things being done, you kind of need Mitch McConnell. You kind of need...
Speaking of these people, I remember how pissed off a feminist was because the fact that someone did what Mike Pence does and said that he wants to be interviewed by a woman if only a man is present.
Yeah, it was a candidate from Mississippi.
Yeah, the feminists were livid, and it's like, you did this.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You did this. It's like, okay, you want to play, like, men aren't going to bitch and whine. It's like, oh, I can't drive alone at night at 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, men are going to be, all right, if I drive alone at 3 a.m., I'm in danger, so what can I do to protect myself?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing, like, if an accusation of rape, we're getting rid of innocent until proven guilty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And an accusation of rape is enough to ruin your career, especially if you're somewhere higher up, well, then you need to protect yourself. How do you do that? I'm never going to be caught alone with a woman, ever. I'm a married man. I'm not a misogynist because I have kids, I have daughters, but I care about my career because of my kids and my daughters.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have defended Mike Pence rules long before...
Me too, yeah.
I think long before YouTube existed. I mean, I was practicing some form of Mike Pence rules like in 2003 when it wasn't popular because, again, I'm an anti-feminist. And I know that these things, false accusations of rape and harassment aren't something new. There is a book called The Fraud of Feminism written 105 years ago. And there's another one called Legal Subjugation of Men written about 125 years ago.
They used to accuse you of being gay before.
No, again, this is specifically with feminists. I mean, Belfort Box was writing about this 125 years ago. Careers were being ended as a result of false rape allegations. This is not something new.
Wow.
This is what my friend calls amnesia. People don't seem to... They seem to think that this...
They don't teach it anywhere.
Yeah, they seem to think that this nonsense emerged yesterday. No, it didn't. It is something very old and has been happening for so long. That's why I was practicing and preaching to other people to do this long before it was popular, because I was like,
like before, I know that they would accuse you of being gay in a culture where, like being gay would mean you get fired. It was quite funny because a lot of pro-family politicians ended up having skeletons in the classes.
Yes, some of them were gay, or at the very least gay-leaning.
Yeah, and the thing with gay and rape, how can you disprove it? Unless you have, like, by some pure chance, like that autist Kavanaugh did, and it's like, oh, you accused me of raping someone 40 years ago? Hold on a little bit, I got my calendars here. Let's see, what date was it? Like,
The Kavanaugh hearings were like when the militant feminist meets the old-time autist. I mean, it was. Kavanaugh was the least likely victim on this case. That guy was prepared for anything.
I'm starting to think that they might have selected him because of this.
I wouldn't be totally surprised if that were the case. I would not be totally surprised if that were the case.
No, but like, I don't remember what I ate yesterday. This faggot knew he knew what he drank 30 years ago at 7 p.m.
Well, he didn't know, but he wrote it down.
And it was so ridiculous because like the press would go like, no, see, you said that 30 years ago you went to have a drink, but here it shows that at 7 and 5 you were at this house. And it's like, what the fuck, it was 30 years ago? Like, do you not think that the man might actually forget? It was so ridiculous.
It's really interesting. You don't have the right to forget. You're supposed to recount events from like 35 years ago impeccably. I mean, are you fucking kidding me?
And meanwhile, the accuser, didn't even remember which party, didn't even remember where it happened, and I was like, so stunning and brave.
That's so stunning and brave. Yeah, no.
Oh my God. She made like $1 million off of it.
Yeah. Although, Mr. Kavanaugh is much nicer than I would have been.
Oh my God. Like, I was thinking, it's like, look.
No. I would have probably hold my composure until I would get the nomination. But then, as a Supreme Court justice, I would sue in the civilian court for slander. Let's start for the reparation. $100 million upwards. Just calculate how much money I would have lost if not gotten the nomination.
It's interesting because the Supreme judges are supposed allegedly to be impartial, and I was making the joke. It's like, I don't know how other people will vote on this issue, but I know how Kavanaugh will vote.
Yeah. If Kavanaugh had any doubts whether he should consistently vote conservative, I think the Kavanaugh hearings made it perfectly clear to him that he kind of owes us a few rulings.
It was so disgusting to see leftist agitators, like all the men, right, having 10 women. I don't know if you saw the recording, but it was
of course I did. I watched it. It was very careful.
Yeah, the old man was like, and all the women. And I was like, holy shit! And this is like on like people see this and they're like, and what's funny is that
they seem reasonable.
the police came in and they arrested the students, who were banging at the doors like the zombies from Resident Evil, like, and I'm like, holy shit! Okay, so this is some asshole's kid, right? Like, imagine you're the father, the idiot who pays the dollars for your progeny to go to university, and then you find out that she's now have a criminal record because she couldn't control herself while in front of the door. And
the U.S. Congress.
U.S. Congress, nevertheless, right?
I mean, I've been to the U.S. Congress. It's a very, very endearing chamber. I mean, it simply wasn't my first instinct to start yelling at people. Even though, like, I won't name them, but, some important Democrats were just passing by me, and I'm like, I despise some of those people, but my first instinct was not to... No, you'd be surprised. I was like, oh, this is nice. Okay,
the only person that chimped out that I know from the right is Alex Jones. Like, Google is evil, and he became red, He was like, Google is evil.
Yeah, but you have to understand that Alex Jones is a character, first and foremost, and even he like once or twice.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when he chimps out on his show, not in...
No, but my favorite part is like, they keep going, the patriarchy. It's like, okay, the patriarch, the guy with the white beard was like, and they were getting arrested. One in the car, they were like, but like, now you have a criminal record, and you have to go to mommy and daddy and tell them, it's like, oh, can you bail me up?
I think that's a win for justice. In fact, because keep in mind, if you have a criminal record in some states, you can't vote.
Oh, you get a strike.
Yeah, and I encourage all leftists to get criminal records in this manner because the fewer leftists vote, the more chance for Mr. Trump to be a president for another 4 years, and then Mr. Mike Pence for another 4 years. And
I actually defended Antifa on this because I thought it's cruel and unusual. Like they protested in a 3-strike rule. And they were getting like 30 to 40 years in prison for, and I'm like, holy shit, in my country you can murder someone and you will not get 30 years.
It depends on the murder. On some of them you might get 30, but...
It needs to be like aggravated murder, because I actually wanted to see like what you need to do in order to do that. So just for one killing, it wouldn't have to be in a public place with cruel and unusual means. Like
yes, and premeditated. Yes. It's pretty hard to get even for intentional murder. It's
like
pretty
30
hard.
years, yeah.
Yeah, and your lawyer to be terrible. So you have to do a lot of fucked up
and not confess, not cooperate with the police.
Yeah. But then again, that's how the U.S. Crime rate has gotten down, by these kinds of very harsh punishments. And yes, sometimes they may seem a little bit overbearing, but so we can wrap up the video.
I think video games got the crime down.
Well, that's one of the reasons.
Can you do a crime while playing a video game?
Yeah, but another reason is because, the really bad guys stayed there forever. That's another reason, because those guys would not, and women, because there are a lot of very, very dangerous women in U.S. jails as well. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean, there's
apparently they masturbate in front of the correctional officer.
Well, some of them, I guess they do that. I mean, there's a lot of fucked up shit that's going on in any jail anywhere in the world. But the thing is that one of the most dangerous jails in the world is a women's jail in the U.S. I don't believe
that. Just to wrap it up, speaking of prisons, I've been watching a lot of prison videos on YouTube. Do you know how Mexican prisons are run?
I have an idea about the Brazilian ones, so I suspect...
Maybe they're similar. Well, you know, you got your pillow and your shoes, and you go in, and the guards take you to the door. And you're like, but where's my cell? And the guards lock the door behind you. Everything is run by the cartels. Like the prisoners run the joint. If you have money from the outside, maybe you're allowed to sleep in a cell. If not, you're going to sleep with everyone else in the courtyard.
That sounds like Brazilian federal prisons.
Apparently, like the cartel that is in the prison has access to firearms.
Yes.
That
sounds like Although in Brazil that was finally tempered. Jair Bolsonaro was like, "Come on, guys, no, just no." But I can totally believe it for Mexico. I mean, yeah, sure. I mean,
they get like women every single weekend, and then
that rare. I guess they're not strong enough. I mean, in Brazil they would get it every day, especially when the left was in power. The prison inmates were the most faithful voters of the Partido de los Trabajadores, because the left was like,
Has Bolsonaro done anything good since?
Well, for starters, he tried to expand gun ownership rights, reform the prison system a little bit, finally gave the police the authority it needed to even begin to tackle the crime rate, which again is insane in Brazil. And now he's leading the crusade to, quote, clean up the Marxist trash in schools, unquote. I hope he does that, because if he manages only that, or even 10% of that, it would be a tremendous civilizational good for the...
I love the Brazilian army motto, like, Brazil overall. And I'm like, you say that in Europe.
I guess in the original German it kind of sounds bad. But then again, the motto of the country is Ordo e Progresso. So, I'm just saying, Right. Colin, thanks a lot for coming to my show, and thanks a lot for welcoming me in your partially renovated apartment.
Thanks for coming, man. It was a great pleasure.
Last time I asked you to come to Cluj, you didn't.
I don't leave the town.
Terrible.
I'm safe here. I don't want to go to Caracalor.
Yeah, but you could come to Cluj. We have progressives over there.
That someone actually recognized me on the street. It's such a weird sensation.
Well, me and my partner, we get saluted all the time on the streets. In Cluj. But again, since most of your videos were with a dark light, only now I guess they get to recognize you a little bit more. But yeah, so what?
No, it's more of a comfort thing. Like if I want to leave, I'm going to go travel to UK.
That's a very nice way of saying you're fucking lazy.
If you ever want to travel to London, we can travel together and we can do an interview there. Not together as in the same plane,
Londonistan, Jesus Christ, mate. Whoa, what have I done to insult me that much? Come on, no. No, I'm not coming to Londonistan. That one is running out, so I guess I can wrap this up. Thanks a lot for watching. See you around on the rotor. Cheers.